like it, we can. Oh, okay, we're live. Excellent. Okay.
Nice.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for showing up. This is a very impromptu stream. I realize that, you know, this isn't everyone's cup of tea to just. Oh, God damn it! I'm so sorry. That was my
party foul.
And I used my I was going to say my one swear, but no one actually buys that. Anyways, thank you for being here. Impromptu stream. Mostly we were hanging out in our very private, very elite Twitter chat, and we decided why not get together and talk trash about some recent bad science, because there has been some. So I've got some wine, we've got some snacks, and we're ready to just sit here and shoot the breeze. So I was going to say something. We were talking about people just randomly showing up, and then I had an anecdote that I was going to do, and it wasn't funny. It's not funny enough to repeat. So we'll just go ahead and toss it around. Obviously, this is my channel, so I'm Erica. I'm Gutsick Gibbon. You guys all know Dan Creation Myths. You guys should go sub to him. And of course, you know Dapper Dino. Go sub to him if you're not subbed. I assume you're subbed to both of them already.
You should be.
But yeah, we're just here chilling. We're hanging out. So Dan, you're the one that is most hype tell us about some of the wild shit that's going on at the Peaceful Science Forum.
Well, so for people who are not, don't have like CMI, which is Creation Ministries International, in their bookmarks bar. For people who aren't like that, they wrote
sane people.
Well-rounded, we call that.
Yeah, right. If you're healthily engaged rather than over-engaged, then you may not realize that they wrote a piece last week. They published a piece by one of their guys, Paul Price, and then two of their kind of scientists, Dr. Rob Carter and Dr. John Sanford, about John Sanford's concept of genetic entropy.
So, quick, before you continue, so Sanford, I don't want to throw it, because Sal was just here. We love Sal, but Sal does work for John Sanford, and some of us are. I have nothing against John Sanford. I just don't love his work, and his recent work. We're about to talk. We're about to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, not a fan of Sanford. He's really dismissive of critics and basically just seems to be offended that people just don't automatically accept everything he says. So they wrote this piece.
Even though it's nonsense most of the time.
Even though it's nonsense. So they wrote this piece responding to critics of genetic entropy. And imagine my surprise was as I'm reading this piece, as I do, because I go, oh, what did CMI say today? And I'm reading this piece and I see my name as one of the critics that they're responding to.
Name dropped. You've made it officially.
So, I mean, that right there made my day, right? Like an official response from CMI to arguments that I've made, like, okay, bucket list, check that one off. That's great. International creationist, or one of the big three, knows who I am.
Of course, the alpha chads only pick on the cream of the crop, so that really is random a resume. That's like top of your CV.
Yeah, this right. Yeah.
Wait, hold up. Do you guys remember when Kent Hovind didn't know what a CV was in a debate? Someone asked to see his CV, and he didn't know what it is. He was like, "What's that? What's the CV?" And James was trying to explain it to him, and it just is not penetrating into his brain.
Dude, poor James on that one. He was trying to be. I actually remember that, and he was trying to be amicable. He was like, so your CV is well, it stands for curriculum vitae, or whatever, however you say the second word. And he's like, and it's kind of like a resume. And Kent was like, oh, yes, yes, of course, yeah, yes, I do have a resume. And everyone was like, we know.
That's not.
Sorry,
Sorry.
All right. So what happened was, it took me like a week or however long it took for me to sit down and bang out a response to this thing. And the way Paul and Carter and Sanford structured this is they had 6 things they responded to, and numbers 1, 2, and 6 they specifically referenced me. So I wrote a response to numbers their rebuttals, numbers 1, 2, and 6. And I put it up on Peaceful Science Forum, I put it up on Reddit, and Erica very kindly put it up as a community post. So thank you for that, just spreading
It was just worth seeing, for sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I can't do community posts yet because those are the rules. So
yeah, YouTube's a dick.
The tyrant, the YouTube tyrant.
So well, the funny part is, so Paul Price, as some of you may know, is a user on both Reddit and Peaceful Science, and the Peaceful Science thread turned into an absolute just roasting because Paul came on and responded to my stuff, and the best part of this, there were so many like just self-owns in this thread. It was amazing. and by the way, I just want to say, I really like, if you come to my channel, my thing is that like we take creation science at face value. We're going to be like, okay, we're going to evaluate these things as scientific claims.
Charitable.
But for right now, like Paul Price has given me a lot of shit over the years to the point of like disputing the fact that I have the degree that I claim I have. So like I'm going to go off.
Yeah.
So like I'm going to go off a little bit right now. Okay. So Paul Price, he took offense with one of my analogies. It's a very simple analogy. It doesn't matter what it is right now, but he said, do any of the other scientists engage with here? And he tagged like 4 people, including Joseph Felsenstein, who is one of the premier population geneticists in the world, literally wrote the textbook that everyone uses on like literally wrote the book. Okay. Tags all these people saying to you, do these other scientists want to sign their names in agreement with what Stern Cardinale has written here? Seems like a repeated rehashing of statements that have already been addressed. He responded. Me, insistently raises hands, hoping the teacher will notice, and then goes on to explain why, yes, what Dan wrote is actually fine, and you need to respond to it. Which is and then one of the other people he tagged went on to respond like, yeah, also it's fine. Like, what's your problem? So that was
glorious right there.
It just exactly.
I love it when someone's like, no other scientist would agree, and then a scientist just pops in and is like, yeah, actually,
this specific one,
right?
So Dapper,
dude,
it's like literally this is the person. Like if you go on Amazon and search population genetics, it's his book that comes up.
Right? Yeah.
Like,
dude, I can't with that. So okay, so catching those up in the chat, who may not be aware. If you did catch my show with Sal earlier, me and Sal go way back from to the Debate Evolution subreddit where we used to do this. It was a banter, if you will. And Sal was a bit notorious in those days on the Debate Evolution subreddit. These days he's really if out. But that's actually where I met Dan as well, and many of the folks who have showed up on this channel before, I met them on the Debate Evolution subreddit. But if Sal is a bit infamous. Paul Douglas Price is that, like, to the nth degree. Paul Douglas Price is an order of magnitude more infamous than anyone else on the subreddit, because Paul Douglas Price is a man who, to your absolute shock and dismay, has no credentials by which to back up the things that he argues, and yet he's 100% relentless in his doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down, quintupling down. You will hear if you went back 3 years and looked at Paul Douglas Price arguments, they're the same ones.
You actually can't go back too far, because remember, his original user was like Paul Price CMI, and then he deleted that user because he didn't want to be like affiliated with CMI on Reddit, so he then went and made a different. So you actually can go back super far because his old stuff is all gone now.
I'll actually go out on a limb and say I would put money on the idea that someone at CMI was like, dude, no.
Dude,
keep your Reddit stuff to yourself. We're not associating it with us. It's fine if you do it, but no, you can't put CMI on it.
With the Wayback Machine, the hope is that we could dig up the Paul Douglas Price ghost lineage and really dig into what it is.
Get some basal Paul Douglas Price Reddit posts.
See, that's the thing, though. If Paul Douglas Price were a creationist trope, he would be stasis. Evolution doesn't happen, because that's what he is. Like Paul, it's the same exact tropes every single time, and.
It would actually be real stasis, unlike quote stasis in the fossil record, which is usually not as much stasis as creationists want to pretend. Oh, Erica?
Uh-oh. Oh no.
You see me? Am I still here?
I know. You were roboting, and now your video is super choppy.
Oh, is it? Should I turn my video off?
Probably for a few minutes at least.
Oh my goodness. Our friend Covert Cuttlefish in the chat just reminded us that Paul Price was Conby 85 before he was Paul Price CMI.
Goodness.
So that was the same it was the same person. So there's like a chain of like three. There was Paul Price, there was Conby 85, Paul Price CMI, Paul. I forget now if it's Paul D. Price or Paul Douglas Price, but it was one of the others. So he's on number 4 now, basically.
Yeah, that's I actually totally forgot about Conby 85. I remember too when he switched from that one, because the great irony in that is that he switched from Conby 85 so that he could claim the Paul Douglas Price namesake, and then like swapped back because he was embarrassed, or CMI told him he was being embarrassing.
That's rough. When CMI is embarrassed by your behavior, like, oh, come on.
It's bad. It's bad. So Dapper, what have you been? What fun bad things have you encountered lately?
So one of my favorite ones is something from Genesis Apologetics, which, Eric and I have similar opinions on Dan Biddle here, who is the head of Genesis Apologetics. And so he made one of the most absurd strawmen that I've ever encountered in terms of creationism. So he put out a video complaining about reasons why the Chicxulub impactor couldn't account for the entire fossil record of the Mesozoic. And it's like, yeah, no one claims that it would. Like, do you think every dinosaur ever was killed by that? Like, do you think that I think every single dinosaur that's ever been in the fossil record was killed by the asteroid? And apparently the answer is yes. He thinks the mainstream position is that every single Mesozoic fossil ever was alive on the same day, and they were all killed by an asteroid impact.
Dude, that's the stuff that kills me with Genesis Apologetics. Is Genesis Apologetics makes claims that could be rectified with like a Google search. Like they're making a video on impact events in dinosaurs, and they can't be bothered to like square what conventional science is actually saying with what they're saying in the video. The bare minimum, the bar is on the floor in the basement, and Genesis Apologetics cannot abide.
So my favorite bit though was they generated.
Wait, Dapper, can I just point a clarification for a second?
Yeah,
they're saying that every dinosaur, like Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, all of them.
Yes, were alive on the same day.
Chicxulub impact.
Yeah, they were all alive on the same day, and they all died on the same day because of the Chicxulub. That's what they think the mainstream explanation is.
That all dinosaurs from the fossils that we have from the Triassic and the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, every one of those fossils is from the assemblage that was somewhere in the world impacted by the Chicxulub impact.
Yeah.
What? I'm not even sure how to ask for clarification on that idea, because
it's completely crazy land. It's nothing about this makes sense.
I got nothing. I don't have like the geology knowledge, but I watched enough. Like, I had a videotape when I was a kid about this, and I watched it till it couldn't be watched anymore, basically. And I know enough about, like, there's the layer, and you know what's there, and you know what immediately was alive when it was there, based on and that's characteristic of, like, what you find in asteroids, but it's not characteristic of what's on Earth. And then you find other fossil layers that are missing those minerals, which tells you they're different from when there was the asteroid impact.
Yep.
Also, there were other mass extinctions.
Yep. There was actually
during the Mesozoic.
Exactly. There was an end Triassic mass extinction. That's the reason that the dinosaurs managed to take over after being kind of sidelined by pseudoscientifics for so long.
Yeah, that's impressive. That is
the whole is just claim. Crazy town. And it's just like, one of my favorite things is they use this website called paleodb.org, which is actually really cool, right? So it inputs the location of just thousands of fossil finds, right? And it puts together like their taxonomy and their location and also their age, right? So you can look down to the stage, right? Because you know how each period is broken down into stages. So you can select particular stages for particular taxa and you can filter it, right? So I'm looking at this map and they're talking about this giant dinosaur kill zone in North America, which is basically just the Western Interior Seaway where dinosaurs got washed in.
Right.
Okay. And also it includes a lot of Morrison Formation, which was a Jurassic sort of arid area, sort of like a, not quite a desert, but sort of like an arid steppe, except there wasn't grass. So, and then a little bit of Triassic, like Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada area. And so, and I'm like, how did they generate this? So I went to PaleoDB to try to generate the same map. The way you generate it is you select Dinosauria and Mesozoic as the two filters. So they had to actually go to PaleoDB and do that, and look at the interface where it shows the entire Mesozoic, including the Triassic, the Jurassic, the Cretaceous, and all the stages underneath, in order to get this map that they're showing me as what they think, I think, is a single dinosaur kill zone from an asteroid.
How can you be that incompetent? Right? Like there has to be a level of intentionality to that kind of representation, because you cannot write a video on the Chicxulub impact and not even just by osmosis pick up some of that knowledge and know the difference between the Mesozoic and the parts of the Mesozoic. Like, to me, that's the most absurd thing I've heard in my life, at least, this week for Genesis Apologetics.
Right.
Because if you'll remember correctly, the last video I covered by Genesis Apologetics, they additionally said, yes, points to the Western Interior Seaway. Look, we have layers of marine animals that are buried, and they're very close to layers that contain terrestrial animals. And they're reading like an excerpt from a paper. And then they say, like, quote, this is like a verbatim quote. They go, "That's just fancy talk for a global flood."
Yeah, the sea transgression. They made the same claim in the video I'm working on now, which actually now I'm finished working on. It just hasn't all come out yet. But they said that, scientists even admit that this entire area was underwater, and they call it a sea transgression, and that's just a flood. And it's like, no, sea transgressions are slow, gradual, non-violent events. Floods are violent, high-energy events. There's a difference.
I want to point out for people watching, just to emphasize the degree of absurdity with these claims. My field is genetics. I don't know anything about the geology. I don't know anything about the fossils, the morphology. Dapper and I have had conversations where I've horrified Dapper with my misidentification of dinosaurs, right? But I can recognize why these claims are absolutely bonkers.
Right.
This makes no sense. This makes no sense based on 7th grade physical science.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, this really is this is flat Earth type nonsense. That's the kind of nonsense that we're dealing with here.
The example that I brought up in my video would be this isn't the exact example, but it's similar. It would be like a flat earther making a video, and they're talking about the curvature of the Earth, and they're like, "That's just fancy talk for a flat Earth." Using the term that is the opposite of a flat Earth.
Yep.
And
it really is.
Yeah, and you're listening to this, and you're just like, all right, is it really possible that there's a gas leak in my house and messed up my medication? Because this is some of the dumbest nonsense I've heard in my life. And Genesis Apologetics is a gold mine for that.
Oh my goodness.
AIG, at least, they seem to have someone vet what they put out there, so it doesn't sound as asinine as what comes out of Genesis Apologetics.
I think it's AIG actually has the list of arguments that creationists shouldn't use. It's one of them. I forget. I think it's AIG.
I know CMI has one, and I'm very confident that AIG has one that's very similar. And I think they actually started their lists when they were still both
when
AIG.
they were the same one, and then they have since diverged and
accumulated my favorite thing about
mutations and selected for different genotypes.
In the split, people from CMI started accusing Ken Ham's secretary of being a demon-possessed necrophiliac.
If you've never read,
I'm not kidding. That's
you've never read about the AIG CMI schism.
It's amazing. It's like, wait, you think this woman is demon-possessed and having sex with corpses?
It really is wild when you see some of these schisms happen, and it's as evidenced by earlier today, I have met some nice creationists. I've met some people who are intelligent people, but there are certainly some individuals out there, and of course there are there are hundreds of thousands of really intelligent religious people in general. But there's this really weird thing that happens. Yeah, billions. Yeah, better. Yeah, billions, of course. Yeah. So it has nothing to do it has nothing to do with like religion as a concept, but there's something really interesting about specifically like when branches of fundamentalism or like the more fringe branches of religion, when a schism occurs there, because all of a sudden the vitriol is super palpable.
Oh yeah,
there's a joke. There's a very dark joke about that I will not repeat here, but there's a very dark joke about that specifically in the United States that you can Google if you just search like religious denomination joke.
And then
like I forget what you would. I forget the you would.
Don Giovanni said she's a Druki, and at first I thought he was talking about you, Erica. And I was like, no, Erica's far too nice for that. Then I realized he's probably talking about the secretary.
Yeah, that's what.
That would make more sense because I was like, no, Erica's way too nice to be a Druki. Come on.
Yeah.
So, Erica, what have you encountered lately that's eye popping?
Oh man,
it's gonna be hard to beat. It's gonna be hard to beat that. It's gonna be hard to beat. Literally every dinosaur was killed by the asteroid impact.
You know what? I have a suspicion that the two of you have already seen this because I did hoist it upon you, and I hesitate to bring it up because I certainly don't want to attract undue attention to that particular channel. But John Maddox said something the other day on his after show or his open mic that even in my state, which was post, I drink occasionally. It's a bad show that I'm currently drinking, but I'm not like someone who drinks most days or even every week.
I don't drink much, says Erica as she swills wine.
Yeah, exactly. But I had just returned from a Christmas party with my future in-laws, so I'd had a couple drinks. And
I will say, on the show you're talking about, you wouldn't know it unless you knew it.
Unless you knew it, right? Yeah, because I caught a little bit of it. I was going on a run the other day, or a couple days ago, and I was like, I might as well just see how I did, because I felt like I was riding that train a little bit, but it was all right. I mean, I could tell, but also I'm me, and you guys know me, so you probably could tell too. But the specific thing that I'm talking about is the reason that I went in, the reason I got into the chat, is because he said, "You're telling me," and he's speaking to someone else in the chat right now, and I had commented on it, and then he was speaking directly to me, and he says, "You're telling me that if you evolved, or like if you mutated and grew wings right now, you're telling me that people wouldn't be seeing that evolution from the rooftop? Are you serious?" Or and in classic John Maddox fare, there were some quite there was some light.
You mean to tell me? You mean to say?
That
if this happened,
you literally
right? Yeah, that's the right.
And so I got in because I'm thinking to myself, maybe it's just me. Maybe I've had too much to drink. Surely he doesn't mean that in the way that in the way that I had heard it. But no, he truly did mean it. He was positing that if an organism, an individual, were to experience like an X-Man style mutation where they grew,
it's an actual X-Man hero.
Like where they grew wings or some crazy shit like that would be touted as evidence for evolution. And I'm thinking, this is a guy who's going around like saying he's going to dismantle the foundations of evolution, or he's got the proof, or wow, can't people just see it? And he doesn't know that like populations are what evolves and like individuals don't. And I had to explain that, and everyone got it once I explained it. I mean, it wasn't for lack of intelligence. It was just a sheer arrogance with a level of informed, a level of ignorance, I guess you would say. That's a mean way of putting it, but it really was kind of wild. And that was kind of the craziest thing I've heard in a while, because like, you can say a lot. I've said this many times. You can say a lot about like standing for truth, but the guy's not going to start talking about stuff that he knows nothing about because he knows it's going to make him look foolish.
I will dispute that. I will dispute that.
Right, all right, dispute it.
I will dispute that, because if you so this is actually, you said when we were talking about having this conversation, you said bring your, what was it? It was bring your bones of contention. That was it. And so the two I wrote down, the first one was like this is like my favorite thing, is being really confident and not actually knowing the basics of what you're talking about. and like Paul Price does this all the time.
Paul Price
Standing for Truth does this all the time. John Maddox, this is a YouTube creationist thing.
John Sarfati also does that
John
all
Snapper,
the time,
yes.
and I hate it so much because he's such a smug little asshole, and he gets everything so badly wrong.
So
and I'm not
some
talking
examples
like,
of
oh,
this.
I disagree with the theory. It's like, no, just point of fact. He'll say,
Right.
we find X anatomy on Y animal. I look at X or Y animal. Nope. Sorry.
I mean,
sorry.
Dapper, so you debated Kent Hovind on whether birds are dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Kent, for some reason, inexplicably, has this debate with you. Literally cannot define what a dinosaur is in this debate, right?
That's in my intro for all my videos now.
What? So, and similarly,
Dr.
Erica,
Dino doesn't know what a damn dinosaur is.
You're having this ongoing conversation with it's basically you asking basic questions and SFT saying you're dodging and you're not answering, but he either is unwilling or at this point I have to assume unable to answer the basic question of what are the criteria for identifying a specimen as either Homo sapiens or not, right?
Yeah,
you would think if you're going to write a book, and I use that phrase loosely, but if you are going to write a book on the falsehood of human evolution, right? You would think you would be able to succinctly and clearly explain the criteria that would allow you to, if you came upon a skeletal remains, you would be able to look for a certain set of traits that would say this is Homo sapiens or this is not Homo sapiens, right? But for all his bluster, the man can not seem to do that.
So it's published. You can look it up. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So in the chat the other day, because to use your phrase, Dan, I did inexplicably find myself after not showing up there in months, I found myself in 2 back-to-back LPP after shows. And one of these I encountered, or maybe this was actually one of Standing for Truth. Either way, I encountered Dr. Raw Matt, my mistake. And,
yes. Dr. Raw Matt.
Yeah, and Raw Matt approaches me and he says, okay, I want to ask you a question. I think I've got a list of criteria and I want to run it by you. I said, okay, yes. Oh my God, yes, run it by me. Holy shit, please run it by me. I was so excited. And he came up with nasal bone, reproductive.
I heard this. Yep.
Yeah, reproductive bone, which is the baculum, which, by the way, the baculum that bonobos have is it's like that big. Like it's barely a baculum. And there are multiple different species of primate that lack a baculum. What were the
some atavistic Homo sapiens bacula? No,
I don't know if there are or not. It wouldn't surprise me because we certainly don't find any bacula like any later than 2 million years. We don't find any associated with any hominins. I don't even think the parenthropines are associated with them.
Wait,
but
hominins or hominines?
Yes. But I'm trying to remember which of the other ones he mentioned. But all of them were I think one was the stoutness of the rib cage. Either way, all of them I was very easily able to be like, all right, I don't think this is going to work because, for one, all primates have nasal bones. Some are more pronounced than others.
All tetrapods have nasal bones.
Yeah, but he's specifically speaking on the rib.
Yeah, glasses. He said you could wear glasses.
Okay.
Glasses, exactly. Yeah. And
weird, but sure.
Yeah. Oh God, I can't for the life of me remember the rest of them.
I mean, he uses what he's doing is he's using Dr. Seuss for his criteria. There's literally a Dr. Seuss book on this.
Yeah.
Wait, really?
It's about there's a nose book, and one of the things is if you didn't have a nose, where would you put your glasses?
Yeah. It was this list though, and I was kind of like, because this is like what I study, I was pretty easily able to be like, all right, here are violations. You see, this thing that you think is unique to Homo, it turns out isn't a gradient. This other thing, gradient.
Surprise, right?
Right,
Yeah.
which is like your whole point in the first place.
Right, exactly. You can't draw the clean line, etc. Then he doesn't answer. So I'm assuming he's back to the drawing board. And I did what I said because I wanted to encourage it. I said, it's a good start. Here are the problems. You're going to want to be more specific because the folks who spend all day trying to figure out what separates genus Homo from, the Australopithecus genus haven't found like a perfect solution.
Wait, was that Australopithecus or Australopithecus?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to be clear.
No. To be very clear, if I had meant Australopithecus, I would have mentioned its telltale apomorphy, which is, of course, the tibula.
And to fill in everyone who is like, what's going on? Yeah, this is a Nephilim-free classic where he went on as a supposed expert or something. I don't know how you managed to get him as an expert, but he went as an expert on
It's a
standing
shallow
for
pool.
truth. Yeah, well, a supposed expert on fossil hominids or something on Standing for Truth channel, and he started talking about Australopithecus and its tibula. And the thing that blows my mind is no one corrects him.
That's what I said, Dapper. I'm not kidding. In my video, I was like,
why?
Why isn't anyone correcting him? I know Raw Matt knows the difference, and I know Standing knows the difference, but no one wanted to, I guess, offend him and be like, hey, Neffy.
Hey. I mean, okay, he is pretty thin-skinned, to be fair.
Do they know the difference?
You know, that's a good question.
Knows the difference, but I know Standing at least knows the difference. CRISPR in the chat says Neff still thinks that RNA is made of amino acids. Yeah, he also doesn't know what a carbohydrate is, so there's that.
Oh, and who was it? I think it was Maddox who thought that ribose was a protein.
Yep.
Thought ribose was a protein, thought a ribozyme was a protein. Yeah.
I'm just like,
everything is a protein.
Dude, yes. Biochemical and protein, not synonymous words. Proteins are a specific class of molecules. Your cell makes things that aren't proteins, so sorry.
Yeah, so this is the thing that really makes me mad too, is when and this is something that since we're on the Maddox hate train right now, which I don't typically do, but to be very clear,
here we are.
He's very vitriolic, and I don't like. He's probably my least favorite of that gang, just because of how vitriolic he is, and I find that very unpalatable. But they'll get someone in there, right, that doesn't really know the subject very well, and they will bully the shit out of them. Call them names, like all this stuff, like roast them in every way that they possibly can. And the second you point at, like, especially if they don't know what something is, then, oh God, help you if you get a definition wrong in there and they know that you got the definition wrong. Because I've seen it happen a couple times. But if you point out that, say, like John doesn't know what he's talking about on something, he like detonates.
And then he gets really tired and has to leave.
Oh, guys, I know I've been doing this 4-hour stream and I've done 7-hour streams, but guys, I'm really tired now that Gutsit Gibbon is here calling me out on my bullshit.
Dude, easily the best one I've seen of those was the one with CRISPR, though. CRISPR, I know you're in the chat. When you hopped in that live stream that one time, because I did catch that one, it was very enjoyable to watch because the funny thing was everyone in the room was in a stupor that's, oh my God, someone who knows what they're talking about is in here. What do we do? And you know, there was a very evident BTFOing that went down. So what are you going to do? So that's my bone of contention. That's the most recent one. Cause I've been, I have been away from the more formal creationist literature lately, other than the Paul Douglas Price stuff, which is
funny note on the question of literature. So, Erica, you're probably familiar with the concept because you're in graduate school and you're dealing with peer-reviewed literature all the time, and you know, you're working on. I'm sure you are doing or have done in the recent past a literature review.
Yeah, they suck.
Awful. And you maybe even had to reach out to an author for clarification about something.
Mm-hmm.
And on every paper, there's an author, and it's the whole long list. And one of them, somewhere in there, usually it's going to be the last one because that's the senior author, or it'll be the first one. It's one of the two, usually, is going to have an asterisk. And then down below, it'll say corresponding author. And that means if you want to respond, if you have any questions, reach out to this person. That's what corresponding author is. Now, CMI, like AIG and like ICR and Discovery Institute, all the creationist organizations, they like to make a show about having like what is essentially in-house. They call it peer review, and they publish a blog, but they call it an online journal. But like, let's be honest, it's a blog. Okay. And so with this recent thing with genetic entropy that Price and Carter and Sanford wrote, Price actually said, send us an email. And we can talk about follow-up work. And he specifically reached out to me and Dr. Joshua Swamidas on this.
Okay.
To say you two and whoever else collaborate, respond to us, right? Swamidas wanted to have a conversation with Paul or whoever else on the phone, and Paul like basically didn't want to hear it. And Swamida's basically had to say, look, you're the corresponding author on this piece, so you reach out to the other two. That is your job as the corresponding author, to reach out to your co-authors to see if they are interested in having a conversation.
That's the corresponding part.
That's what the term means, right? Paul Price responded first with, what does that mean? And second with, that's not a thing at CMI.
Well, then why did they list you?
If you do, well, they didn't. But like that's the role he's playing as like the public facing person that's interfacing with people. Okay, you're the corresponding author. Great. If you don't have a corresponding author in a formal way, then what you wrote is not a paper. It is a blog post, right? Like like a corresponding author is part of the scientific publishing thing. If you don't have a corresponding author, you are play acting. You are not doing it for real.
Right. This is literally the same thing as like when Ramat put the PLOS watermark on there in the DOI, right?
Oh my goodness.
It's like making the steps to be like basically masquerading as if this is a done deal. It's very professional. It's whatever, but without doing the work that is required to earn those things, right? Like I can't wrap my head around like, because you know the way that went down was someone was like, Paul, we're going to list you as the corresponding author for this paper. And Paul was like, yes, okay, go ahead and do that. And then it's like shocked Pikachu face when he gets a call that's like, hey, Paul, you think maybe you could like be a corresponding author?
Okay, so
I don't think they don't have like a formal thing though with corresponding author. It's just that Paul was basically playing the role of what the corresponding author would be in terms of if people are talking about it, you're the one that like responds. So it's like, okay, you're the person that we're talking to. So now if I want to reach out to set something up with all the authors or this other author, I go through you. That's how it works.
Right.
And then he's just like, no, that's not what this is. Like, well, then it's not a paper. Like, what are we doing here?
I want to point out one quick thing about Ramat, which is, so there is a just for fun award show put out by Red's Rhetoric, and if you don't know who that is, he mostly does he films rocket launches from Florida. He lives near enough to do that, although I think he's moving, so that might be changing. But he holds a competition called the acronym is DFOTY, and it stands for Dumb Something of the Year. I'll let your imagination fill in what it is.
Fork. Stands for fork.
Yes.
The worst eating utensils of the year.
Yes. So, but I was on the nomination panel for the first time this year, and my nominee was in fact Ramat. And so, if you guys want to go to Red's Rhetoric channel, he has a video that is telling you how to vote, and you go to that video, and then you can click on Ramat's link, and you can vote for Ramat to be the official dumb person of the year for 2020.
So I want to comment on something as well, very briefly, that kind of encompasses what we're discussing in general here with the YouTube creationists. Obviously, we've got the professional ones, the ones that would genuinely be.
After you're done, I want to bring up a beef with the professional creationists because, like, they don't know what they're talking about either. But we'll come back to that.
True. Yes, true. And we'll do the old one too, because this one really gets me. So every now and again, I do, like I said, I find myself in like a Standing for Truth after show, or like one of his debates if someone I know is debating someone on his channel, which happens less and less frequently as time goes on. And every so often I catch one of his live like shows, right? So last night, I'm up late. I'm trying to get myself prepped for this meeting I've got that I had this morning. And lo and behold, I see Standings hosting this 2:45 a.m. live stream. And I'm thinking to myself, I got to take a look. So I hop in, I'm listening, and I'm a little bit late, of course. And I catch Standing, and he's on one of his monologues, and he can public speak pretty well. And as he's talking, he's like, and this is paraphrasing, of course, but the general vibe is like, we've got them on the run. This is what keeps them up at night. They're so scared of this. They can't deal with this. If you don't deal with it, it's game over. You have to address this, all this stuff. and it's like genetic entropy or like ERV monologuing, which it's like I've yet to hear anyone discuss the paper that shows that xenotransplantation shows that endogenous retroviruses revert to a viral form. Essentially, they start behaving like viruses again, thus showing that they are indeed ancient viruses. Or with the genetic entropy thing, you can't change the definition. It's that simple, guys. It's literally like you could get into the details, but you can full stop that. You have to change the definition to make it work.
Can I give you a fun example of that just from like today where that happened?
Yeah, please do. And then I got one more thing to say and I'll pass it on.
Yeah, here, let me just show you, just to give everybody an idea of the degree to which they play this game with fitness. So in my response to this genetic entropy thing where they mentioned me, I wrote that you can't you can't have deleterious mutations accumulate without without being selected against. That's literally a contradiction in terms, because deleterious means hurts your relative fitness. And if your relative fitness declines, then you are selected against. That's what the definitions mean.
That's just by saying those words. It's basically a tautology.
It's a tautology, right?
Yes.
So Paul Price in his response on Reddit quoted me. He said, I wrote blah 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 blah. Deleterious mutations are occurring. The only way he cut off the quote halfway, but deleterious mutations are occurring would be for the relative fitness of every individual to be the same, i.e., for the population-wide relative fitness to be 1, which is to say everybody is exactly equal, because then you can't have selection for against anything, right? He writes, not the same, just so similar that the differences don't matter for reproduction. That's what I just said, Paul. That's what I just said.
That is the same in terms of fitness.
That's what those words mean.
Right. That's...
Yeah, this semantic game with the absolute fitness or whatever it is that they're calling it, it really does blow my mind a little. So here's the final point that I was going to make is just that.
Yeah, go back to. I just wanted to point out that.
Because I'm with you. I'm with you on that. And like, and for whatever reason, that really makes Standing mad. He's like, and when he's referencing me, usually he's referencing someone that runs in our very small niche group on YouTube. Usually someone is on the chopping block for the night. With
a fun nickname, hopefully.
Yeah, with a fun nickname, right. Yeah.
Diaper Dino. Always good.
Diaper Dino.
Diaper Dino.
Always fun. I think that's one of their best ones, honestly.
I'm jealous, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Not good.
Not nearly.
Yeah. Or Dan's Pseudoscience Man. It's a mouthful. It's just too much.
Plus it's ripped off.
It's clunky.
No, here's the thing. It's not just clunky and boring. It's also ripped off from flat earthers talking about Simon Dan.
Yep. It's
a legit rip-off of
not
flat earthers. Yeah, no. When you're ripping off flat earthers, you got a problem.
Yeah, dude.
Do not do that, guys.
Weak sauce.
Anyway, Erica, what were you saying?
Yeah, so my rounding off of this entire concept was, it's like, as I've harped on, because I've had nothing but it on my brain, I've been doing a lot of thesis shit lately, talking to a lot of advisors, emailing a lot of professors, emailing a lot of people who I got data sets from. And I'm so floored by the dichotomy of interacting with young Earth creationists online who think, genuinely or not, this is the posturing they put out there, they're on the precipice of overturning it all. This is it. They are about to flip the script. The end is near. This is it for evolution. ID's on the rise. It's all about to happen, whatever. And it's like, I interact every day with these people who are actually in the field doing legitimate science, from population geneticists to ecologists to people who focus more on primatology or anthropology, all of these people. And they don't even know that these creationists exist.
Yeah, no,
they don't even know. Yeah. And if you bring it up every now and again, I've gotten into a conversation where I'll be like, yeah, I've got this YouTube channel. Because someone will say something along the lines of like, yeah, back in the day, I'd show up at a creationist conference, and I was like, that I can sympathize. I play fight with creationists online right now, and they'll say, are they really still at it? Like, and they'll say it like that.
Oh, how cute.
Yeah, and you're kind of like, okay, and it puts it into and every once in a while I have like a little skip where I'm like, yeah, this really is more of a hobby, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's exactly my experience in going to grad school for evolution, is that there's a handful of people that, interact with this. There's, your Ken Millers, there's your actually a really funny coincidence at the famous, the Dan Grauer, if ENCODE is right, evolution is wrong thing.
Yes.
I was at that conference. I was at that talk. I witnessed that live. I actually met, by coincidence, Nick Motzke at that conference.
Okay.
During the poster session, I was wandering around. He had a poster, but he ended up chatting about Dover for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And if anybody doesn't know who Nick Motzke is, just Google, and I'll put it in the chat. Just Google. It's C design proponents is, and it's Nick.
Yeah. Yep.
Motzke. So anyway, just Google that if you don't know who I'm talking about. But like, other than those very few people, like if you were to say, oh, what's going on with Discovery Institute? What's Dembski, Behe, whatever, nobody knows what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, no.
Like, nobody knows. Nobody cares.
Well, I actually have a sort of analogy because I like to compare young Earth creationism and flat Earth because it's basically the same thing.
It's the same thing. What did you say? It's flat Earth, but better at geography?
Yeah, it's flat Earth is better at geography.
True.
So flat earthers will sometimes say things like, why doesn't NASA just put a 24-hour live cam on a rocket and send it to the moon so now we all know? It's like, because no one cares what you think.
Yep.
You are a complete ignoramus about everything to do with this topic. And people doing actual science have neither the time, nor the energy, nor the give a shit to do stupid stuff to convince you of something that everyone already knows is true.
So actually, Dapper, I think there might be something of merit there. I think really and truly, so we look at flat Earth, we say flat Earth is it's a fringe belief, but it's there. So I'm thinking I'm in charge of NASA, right? I raise a little bit of money, maybe even a significant amount. I build a small rocket. I call up Nathan Thompson, right? One of the big flat Earth guys. I put him in this rocket and I'm like, and he knows, he's like, all right, this is it. We're either going to prove or we're going to,
or he's going to die.
And I shoot him into the sun. Like, just
no, Erica. No, please don't shoot people into the sun because it takes a lot more fuel to get to the sun than it does to get out of the solar system. Just send them out of the solar system entirely.
Fair enough.
Someone in the chat makes a good point, though. There is a live cam from the International Space Station.
Right.
But here's the thing. Here's their objection. It goes down every once in a while. That's their entire objection to that. It goes down every once in a while. It's like when you say, oh, hey, we carbon dated this snail and it didn't work out too well. It's like, well, was it in a known carbon reservoir? Yes. Okay. And they're like, yeah, but it didn't work this one time. I'm like,
no,
okay,
but Dapper, you're forgetting there's the other samples that were lacquered that they carbon dated that worked out the way they wanted.
Oh, dude, my favorite part of that is you've got real legitimate creationists. They've got geology degrees, your Andrew Snellings, your Steve Austins, these guys who are or experienced at least. And they're radiometrically dating rocks of known age that are like less than 100 years old.
They know they can't.
And that's the thing that gets me is that it's like, if that is the case, if you're truly correct on this, then we wouldn't get correct dates for things like Pompeii and Mount Vesuvius, where enough time where enough time has occurred for the first little bits of decay to start. But it blows my mind that because there's no way someone like Andrew Snelling doesn't know. I have such a hard time.
He's done legit geology in which he actually accurately reported on the radiometric dates, and that he said in his thesis for his doctorate degree that there was a high degree of correlation in the radiometric dating of the samples he was working with from multiple techniques, and they all correlate on the same date. And it was, I don't remember exactly what layer he was working in, but it's in like the hundreds of millions of years range.
Makes you wonder, right?
Yeah, so another thing about that's really interesting, and I learned this from my probably favorite book on the subject, which is The Bible Rocks in Time. It's written by two Christian geologists. And they basically have sat down and they're like, here's why the young Earth does not work according to all of geology, period. And they go through, they probably go over 100 specific examples of
giving me more to read, thanks.
Yeah, like I can't recommend enough of like varves or very specific deposition rates, limestone, the aspects of different kinds of chalk, all of this stuff. And one of my favorite things that book taught me in its radiometric decay section. And it's the fact that when discordant dates are recorded, those discordant dates are usually within a few million years of each other and ultimately give a very ancient age. So for instance, it would be considered, geologically speaking, like 5 separate discordant dates if you got like 2.5 billion years, 2.553 billion years, 2.557 billion. Like that's 3 separate discordant dates, even though they're so close to one another, and definitively tell you that whatever you're dating is around 2.5 billion years old.
Yeah.
But
well, so
when creationists bring this up, they'll be like, look at all the discordant dates. And if you take the time to look at it, those dates are discordant, but they're very, very close. They're outside of the realm of being non-discordant, but they're very close and they're very old, always.
I like to compare things like that with saying like, okay, so this is like, let's say that Dan and Erica decided to try and measure the distance between New York and Chicago, right? And they both get like, say about 2,000 miles, but one of them is like 2,200 miles. And I don't actually know the distance, so don't quote me on this. And I say, the fact that they disagree by 200 miles means that my idea that New York might actually be 78 feet from Chicago is reasonable.
Driving. It is 789.4 miles via Route 80,
so
which you
we'll
take all the
We'll
way.
call it 800. So we'll call it 800.
So say 800 miles.
Yeah. So
but if I say it's 1,000, I'm still off by a lot, right?
Right.
I'm off
but
by,
if I say it's 80 feet,
that's
which is
more
the
wrong.
kind of error that we're talking about.
You can't use my error to say that you're then right. I'm pointing the wrong side.
Right.
You're then right.
We're talking about like, oh, we're off by a few million years. Like, there's a disagreement of about 20 million years.
Yeah.
Therefore, 6,000 years is reasonable.
Right. And
no.
The additional thing to that, right, is because the inevitable response is, okay, fine. Maybe miraculously or whatever, there's accelerated nuclear decay during the flood, whatever, the classic points. And then the inevitable response to that, and that I've yet to see like elaborated upon, is just how many non-radiometric dating methods have to increase stepwise with the radiometric decay rate just so it appears that the two corroborate each other. We're talking about coral clocks, dendrochronology, the speed at which the continents move from one point to another. We're
ice
talking
cores.
Ice cores, yeah, all of these different things, and they have they're so independent, but just so happens that they, for whatever reason,
randomly happen to line up perfectly. All these independent things just happen to line up.
Was the flood caused by the god of the Bible or Loki? Remind me. I'm not sure.
And how do you cause accelerated dendrochronology dates? Like, how do you accelerate the rate at which rings form in trees?
Well, my favorite thing with the dendrochronology is they say, well, sometimes trees can produce double rings. And it's like, okay, first, true. Second, those are distinguishable from normal annual rings. So generally speaking, dendrochronologists can tell if it's a single year double ring or if it's actually 2 years. But third, even if we were to cut all of dendrochronology in half, we're still getting human-built settlements older than you think the universe is.
Yeah.
So something isn't jiving here. Because unless you're going to tell me that there's like 5 rings a year, which we've never seen anywhere.
So here's another one to pocket on that one, Dapper. It's that when you look into the dendrochronology, and this is also from the Bible Rocks in Time, by the way, it's actually more common that a tree will accidentally not produce a ring.
Yeah.
And it will produce a regular ring, and then the rarest is that it produces 2. So it's like, okay, let's give it to you. Let's, like you said, let's go ahead and double the rate, right?
On this topic of experts, turns out not either misrepresenting or not knowing what they're talking about. My favorite punching bag on that subject is our friend Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson. Erica, may I share a figure from one of his
by all means
blog posts? Because this is one of my favorites where like you know what this is, you know what the deal is here. And this is a figure from one of his pieces on on AIG. It's about
yes.
speciation rates and
Oh my goodness.
what he tries to do is he looks at different phylogenies. So these are mitochondrial phylogenies. This one, A is mitochondrial, C is mitochondrial, including, he says fossil sequences. They're not fossils. That's Neanderthals. They're not fossilized, but that's what that is. It's DNA recovered from Neanderthal specimens. It's not the fact that he calls them fossil sequences is should be disqualifying right away.
Sometime we're going to have a discussion about what the word fossil means, because there's really not a good definition. So I'm going to say that, like, I don't super object to the term. It's not really correct. But
I would think mineralized would be part of it, and you're not getting sequenceable DNA from mineralized.
In terms of professional paleontology, mineralization not technically a requirement.
Okay, fair enough. I withdraw my objection. Okay. And then
it's a weird way to. It's a weird thing to say.
So my thing here is first of all is Jeanson draws these three trees. Now, for anyone watching, these are unrooted trees because they don't have a branch that is sticking off where you say this is the common ancestor of everybody on the tree. It's showing the relationships of all the branches, but not indicating the directionality, right? You could say up here is the most, like up in the top of the tree is the most ancestral. You could say right in the middle is the most. It's arbitrary because it's an unrooted tree. Now, Jeanson talks about this in the context of rooted trees. He said you can do a thing called midpoint rooting, where you take the consensus middle of the tree and say that's the ancestor. Now, what he tries to claim is because you have these three nodes here, and you can see he's very pointing out all three nodes on each tree. He's saying, okay, you've got these three nodes. Well, that represents the three daughters from the flood, right? The Noah's sons' wives. Right. And that's what I call them because they don't get names at any point. They're just Noah's sons' wives.
Yep.
And the problem is this tree does not show three individuals that existed concurrently with lineages descending from each of them. What this tree shows, depending on how you root it, as in depending on where you put the past-present directionality, either you have the middle node, right, is the parent, and the other two represent daughters, so it's parent, daughter, daughter.
Right.
Or you have grandmother, daughter, granddaughter. There's no way to interpret this tree where those three nodes for any of these three trees, because they all show the same stuff. There's no way to interpret these three trees as having those three nodes as representing three concurrently existing individuals, which is required by the Genesis model. And this is Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson of AIG saying, this shows Noah's flood, three wives, boom. He knows better. Nathaniel Jeanson has a PhD from Harvard. As we are reminded, every GD time his stuff comes up.
Seriously.
Okay? Right?
Seriously.
Oh, you're going to dispute Nathaniel Jeanson? He has a PhD from Harvard. I don't care. I get a PhD from rinky-dink Rutgers. But you know what? I'm right and he's wrong. Like,
there's nothing wrong with Rutgers.
I know. Well, yeah, I know. Yes.
People
they're just either they don't know how to read phylogenies, and Rob Carter will use these same figures. He's got his own versions, making the same mistake. Either they don't know how to read phylogenies, or they're just lying about what these trees are showing.
So here's the weird thing about that though, because you guys were both there. Sal can read a phylogenetic tree. Sal works for John Sanford. Sal is a smart guy. He can read a phylogenetic tree. So how is it that Jeanson can't? Like, I don't understand that. Like, Sal is sitting, here. He's blowing it out of the water, showing how, you use mega, whatever, and how you create these phylogenetic trees. It was a super fun conversation. I learned stuff. And Jeanson, who's got a PhD from Harvard, is messing this up. I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. And the weird thing is, we've all three here seen the responses to it's an unrooted tree and it's got these weird notings.
Really, for real, it's actually a rooted tree. The root is invisible. Like, what's the counter argument? That is an unrooted tree.
So the only thing I can think of,
really wrong.
The only thing I can think of is Jeanson has a rooted tree somewhere in his notes that he bases unrooted tree off of. Yeah. He's hiding it, even
He's got
though
a secret plan to control inflation is what Jeanson has.
Even though showing the rooted tree would both be easier to interpret for the layman and better make his point, he decided to make it easy for us to pick apart his argument by just showing the unrooted tree. Because why actually make your point?
Just show the rooted tree. Just show the rooted tree. But the problem is, if you root the tree, because Evograd has done this on his series, taking down Replacing Darwin by Nathaniel Jeanson, he actually goes through the trouble of the slog of going back through Jeanson's papers and redoing Jeanson's analysis, which is hard because Jeanson's supplements are useless if you're trying to figure out what he did. So it really takes some work to go back and like recreate what Jeanson did. But Evograd did it. He really took the time to do it. And when you do it, you end up with mother, daughter, daughter. Instead of three concurrently existing unrelated individuals.
So that's very telling too, because as everyone here knows, and everyone in the chat probably knows too, one of the most important things to do when you're writing a paper is to include how you did it, because replication is like step one.
Raw data in your supplements. You need to put the raw data there. In Jeanson's supplements, it's one Excel spreadsheet with like a few tables. It's not the raw data set. You can't recreate his analysis.
Which means his entire thing is useless, by the way.
Right.
That's just like me saying, oh, hey, guys, I went out and I did a thing, and then I got an excellent geodetic survey, and it said the Earth is flat. Totally trust me.
Yeah. And it's like you show up with a like a topographical map, and you're like, I realize this says it's topographical, and at the scale that it's at shows that there is, in fact, a curvature or whatever. But that's not actually what it shows. Trust me.
Oh, wait a minute. We've got an update here. Standing for Truth says, those are obviously unrooted trees from the display perspective.
Okay.
But Jeanson says he knows where the root is.
Then tell him to show it.
While Carter admits he doesn't and prefers the unrooted trees as it allows a natural reading. Jeanson has this information secret. People are saying, you're showing unrooted trees. You need to root the trees in order to make your point. Jeanson apparently has the rooted trees somewhere that make his point, but for reasons unknown, the man is keeping them secret.
Like I said, guys, my measurements totally prove the flat Earth. I'm not going to show them to you.
The man wrote a book and gets offended if you say your book does not demonstrate what you claim it demonstrates, but he omitted one of the major things from his book that would support the assertions made in the book.
So this is the scientific equivalent of my girlfriend goes to another school. You know, you can't, you have to by
put up or shut up at some point.
Yeah, it's basic principles of rigor. You know, I mean, again, I bring it up way too often, but I've got it on the brain. It's like, I'm a master's student. I'm going to hate my thesis in 10 years as Dan and everyone's told me.
It's so bad.
As everyone has told me, but I'm pouring my heart and soul into it, and I've got to jump through hoops that evidently Nathaniel Jeanson has not jumped through. I don't get to not include supplementary material. It's mandatory. It's mandatory for the thesis that I'm submitting to my university. It's mandatory. So
if your committee can't go back and check your work, they're not going to pass you.
Yeah, no, why they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Look, the whole point about science is accountability and repeatability. That's why there was such a huge controversy when they found out that in certain especially some of the softer sciences, let's be fair, there was some real problems with like
psychology. Yeah, it's psychology. Don't get me started. At some point, one of these days, I'm going to be on here and someone's going to ask a question about evolutionary psychology, and I'm going to just rant and rave for 10 minutes about evolutionary psychology.
It's not just evolutionary psychology. It's psychology in general has a problem with reproducibility.
Yeah. Well, to be perfectly to be fair, you've got an inherent issue with behavior is super individualized.
Oh yeah, no, so, I'm not saying it's easy.
Standing just gave us an answer. He said that Evograd was right, essentially. He said it would look like M and N came from L, which is correct, which is the case. I think I have the letters right. I think that's what Evograd's tree shows, if I remember correctly. I always forget which group is which.
L? No,
but
yeah, L would have.
But the point is, well, look, you could say, ABC. I don't care what the actual letters are. The point is, two of them came from one of them. It's not three separate lineages.
No, yeah.
Jeanson claims it's 1, 2, 3 separate, but the real situation is two of them are nested within the other one.
But Dan, how about this, right? let's say we have.
So Jensen's wrong. I just want to point out for the record here that Jensen's wrong. We all agree on that, and our friend in the chat agrees on that. I just want to point out for the record that's what just happened.
But I'm going
Whether he realizes that is an open question.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Let's say that 2 of Noah's wives shared a mother in common. They're sisters.
Right.
But the other one is their cousin, their first cousin. Would that result in the same tree?
No, because the cousin one would be not nested with the other 2. It'd be like this. Right, because you would share, because the cousin, they would share a grandmother, right?
Right,
which
all
would be
three share a grandmother.
They would have to share a grandmother, and then you've got 2 of them sharing a mother and 1 sharing a separate aunt relative to the other 2, right? But that's not what you see.
Okay. I just want to say, because I feel like that's like best case scenario for Jensen's thesis, and I just want to like...
Yeah.
Hey, let's give them a chance to
Standing for Truth just Standing for Truth just said that we're right and Jensen is wrong. So, I mean...
Oh, well, hey, you know what?
So, there you go. We're making progress here, everybody.
Well,
See, this was such... Erica, and we thought this was just going to be a BS session and not actually be productive.
Listen, we've got 61 people. I did not think this many people would show up, but I'm glad that everyone's enjoying the chat because I'm having an absolute ball.
Oh, yeah. Plus, I mean, you know, there's wine and rum and beer, so...
That's the truth. That is the truth.
So, I had another one building off of this. Just a second.
Bone of contention.
Let me check my notes.
Hit us with the next bone of contention.
Let's see. The other one I had was and this is one of my favorite things. It pops up on Reddit sometimes. We saw this where it's you have a creationist learn something new for the first time. They learn like a new term or a new concept in evolutionary biology.
Oh, yeah.
They think that like, this is the thing that does it. Evolution can't work because of this thing. And you get this with like Haldane's dilemma. And it's like, yeah, that's from 80 years ago, like whatever that was. Like we figured that one out, guys.
Incomplete lineage sorting is another one.
That's a good one. Yeah. My favorite recent one of this was when Paula Price realized that while mutations are probabilistic, they are not all equally likely in terms of, so they're random, but they're not equally random. So he made the argument that genomes have to be young because if they were ancient, because there's a C to T mutation bias, there would be no more GC in the genome.
You
think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Think about that one for 30 seconds, okay? So there's a rate at which C goes to T, right? So GC to AT. And it's higher than the rate at which AT goes back to GC. But the AT to GC rate is not 0. But because it's biased, the argument was that if genomes were actually billions of years old, you would be out of GC. Because there would have all been
no selection. If there were no selection, maybe it would become predominant.
But even putting aside selection, it just resets the bias just resets the equilibrium point. It doesn't make it 0.
The classic one, the hyper classic that I've seen lately is insert fallacy with regard to fitness or genetic entropy or natural selection or whatever, and then forget to apply either natural selection or recombination, and then call it a day. That's what I've been seeing a lot, at least on Reddit. And the other day in one of the chats, I saw who was it? I think it was one of Standings guys. I think it was George Bond. So he shows up in the chat. He's talking about geology. He's like, yes. Did you know that if the Earth was actually old, because of the erosion rates, the Earth could only be 12 million years old? So I click on, I'm like, okay, let's see what's going on here. Send me the link. So I'm looking at the link. First of all, it's a paper from like 1982. Second of all, it doesn't take into account deposition rates in that paper, let alone modern deposition rates. And so I point this out, and the response was essentially, nuh-uh, yes, it does. Okay, well, where? No, it does. Look at the paper. I got it right in front of me, my guy. Where is it at? Just tell me. Tell me what to control F. Silence. Radio silence.
Yeah.
Oh, RJ is here.
Hey, RJ.
RJ might have. RJ, do you have a bone of contention?
No,
That's a
no,
yes.
I just wanted to stop in. I figured you might be
That's a
still
yes.
running
How
amok
much time you got?
over here. My show went off okay today.
All right.
Whole
RJ,
hour
share-
without any glitches. Yeah.
Share with us your least favorite recent creationist trope.
Or your favorite. I've
Or
been doing my
favorite.
favorite, honestly.
Yeah.
I've misunderstood
Oh,
the
They're
prompt.
kind of the same thing, to be
I
honest.
mean, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like a kid in the candy shop when I think it was LPP was throwing up a chart of dinosaurs when he was trying to go after therapsids, and it was one that I knew exactly what he was doing. It was the Kirby Comfort dinosaur claim from 2013 that I had explicitly dismantled in Evolution Slam Dunk.
Is that the one I just
sorry.
recently shared?
I'm sorry. Hold on, RJ. Are you telling me our friend John Maddox tried to assess like an actual phylogeny? Like he actually tried to assess something that isn't just a bio or bust? No, certainly no one who knew anything about what was going on was in the chat. Yes?
Accent on the tried. Yeah, I'll be doing a thing on it in a future evolution hour because, of course, he was thinking, oh, he's demolished therapsids. No, he hasn't. But along the way, he couldn't resist this stupid chart that he got from Answers in Genesis. I tracked down because it's slightly different than the one that Kirby and Comfort were doing back in 2013. They've gussied it up with some blue graphics. But I tracked down which one he got that from. The problem is, it was from a 1990 Dinosaur book, the Lambert Dinosaur volume. That's a perfectly fine dinosaur book for 1990, but there's been paleontology since then. So all of these supposed problems with the crocodiles and the dinosaurs, there's been slews of fill in the blanks.
You're saying that in the past 30 years, people have found new fossils and done new studies? I don't believe you.
Shocking.
They're still doing science?
It's a shock, isn't it?
Guys, I'm going to be right back. I'll be back.
And because I already knew about the dinosauromorphs and all of that, and I knew about the crocodiliaformes, you know, and the same thing with mammaliaformes, that in every one of these major transitions, there's the almosts, and it's almost like a glut of things that are nearly this and nearly that, and so it's a matter of, well, which one do we want to prefer as the most likely, really nearly, but it's a glut of possibilities, and so tracking out that, and the point was, it was so funny because Kirby, who was the younger creationist that Ray Comfort was relying on for his apologetic video, Kirby just yanked this thing out of his ass back in 2010, and our little Crocoduck kid riffed off of it as well. They were just incestuously copying from each other. Well, to see that chart popping up in 2020, I'm going, oh, there is a God.
You know,
he admitted it. Everyone heard it. Everyone heard it. RJ admitted it.
Yeah, true. Yeah. You can't escape
it's Marduk, damn it.
I realize we're doing a bit of a dog pile on John Maddox right now, but to be fair, he's gotten a bit overconfident because he started talking about things that he really, really doesn't know anything about. And I think he would be better.
That's like everything.
I mean, I've only been doing the YouTube thing since like the pandemic, but like my impression is that's always been the case.
No, again, orders. There are orders of magnitude with this. So because John has a experience as like a programmer or whatever, he can at least use programming language and attempt to make that connection. But I heard him unironically say in a chat the other day, one of the two that I mentioned earlier, that, well, how do we know that the hominins aren't just a result of phenotypic plasticity, like dog breeds? And I said to myself, boy,
Nope.
I sure wish that the highway near my house was busier so I could throw myself onto the nearest truck.
That's just what? Was that the one? Was that the stream where it sounded like everybody was talking in between ripping giant bong hits?
I missed both of those things, but the
sorry,
summary.
we were both talking. RJ, go ahead. My point was not substantive, so go ahead, RJ.
Oh, that does he not realize that this blows his whole argument to smithereen because he will have just put all of the hominids in a same kind?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
a clade.
Well-
That's a clade.
Yep.
Thanks,
Well,
John.
to be fair, in a very recent, in either the same, I can't for the life of me remember because all of the Maddox content blends together, but it was either in
Well, it's all the same.
yeah, it was either in the subsequent show or that show. He also said, oh, no, you know what? It was definitely the one that I was speaking with him in, because I said to him, I said, John, I'm very surprised that someone who claims to be so interested in only the empirical, that you're a young earth creationist, given all of the just absolutely math-based empiricism that is behind geology. That is, I mean, so is evolution, of course, but it's much more in your face with geology than the math is. And this man says, and he starts riffing on it, and I was like, God, I want to dig into this, but we're talking about something else. He starts talking about how actually the quantum mechanics literally show that there is reason to doubt that the Earth is actually very ancient. And I said, the what? I can't remember if I said it out loud or if I was just like astrally projecting from my body. But I'm like, the quantum mechanics? What about excuse me? Someone should tell Snelling. Someone should tell Ray.
I can't think of a single young earth creationist quantum mechanics guy.
Well, I can't think of a single creationist really and truly that's ever utilized quantum anything in an argument. And I'm thinking to myself, what on earth is this guy? But this is the same guy that won't talk to like Leo Phileas or like any of those guys about anything physics related for whatever reason. I've got a bone to pick with John Maddox right now. He's apparently James tried to get him in that tag team debate that was supposed to be with him and Otangelo, and it was supposed to be me and Cygart, which I love Cygart. And yeah, apparently he didn't want to do it. I
should tell him that if it's John, I will totally do it. I told Otangelo I'd do it if it was 1-on-1 or 1-on-2 because I don't like tag team debates. But if I get John in there, then I will totally do the tag team debate.
John wouldn't do it. That's the problem. Because I would have done it if it was John.
Well, right, because
it would be fun.
John
well, yeah, I mean,
on me because he is so bloody pompous.
I've said this before, but I've never in my life seen such a bizarre ratio of like arrogance and being uninformed. Like it really is this intense number.
Once again though, I just want to come to standing for truth's defense in this conversation, okay? Because I mean, this is a man. Here we have a man who wanted to explain to me how inbreeding led to the unique genetic profile we see in Neanderthals, but apparently did not know the definition of inbreeding in the context of population genetics. So I just want to come. I don't want to say that exceeds. I just want to say it's close. There's competition for that ratio.
Standing for truth for his sheer amicability ranks very high on my creationist I find likable list.
Well, okay, now, I do want to push back though.
Both of them are adequately pleasant.
Well,
I think he's getting a little impatient with people because, he's kind of, he debated me on Neanderthals, and then he debated Walker on Neanderthals, and then he debated David Neff on Neanderthals, except that turned into a genetic entropy debate where Standing, just did not let Neff talk. It's could you please answer the question? Well, you're tap dancing. Let him freaking answer the question, man. And, my sense is that he's getting a little impatient with the conversations that do not go the way he wants, and that is coming through in his more recent work.
He's desperate to have affirmation for a position that he cannot get on the merits.
So I will actually push back on that, Dan. And the reason is because obviously I have a soft spot for Standing for Truth, but also because even though he pisses me off sometimes, sorry, Standing, if you're still in the chat. But what I wanted to specifically say is I have had conversations with Standing for Truth where genetic entropy has been brought up with relation to things like Neanderthals or other things that basically in conventional science have nothing to do with genetic entropy. But in the creationist worldview, you can kind of shoehorn genetic entropy into whatever because it's part of the fall and is thus always applicable. So I think
one error fits all.
Well, yeah, well, I will fault Standing for not giving Neff the heads up, because if you want a real, like, genuine debate, I think it's always good practice to be like, hey, yes, we're discussing Neanderthals, but we might also discuss genetic entropy. I will fault him for that. But I do think in his head, those two things are inextricably linked. I will say that.
Well, Neanderthals are inbred.
That's the opposite of genetic entropy, by the way, is inbreeding, loss of genetic diversity, high genetic drift. That is the literal opposite of genetic entropy. They are opposite processes. Genetic entropy and mutational meltdown, i.e. extinction vortex, are opposite things. And in Standing's book, or maybe it was Raw Matt's book, it was one of these two books I have right here. I think it was Standing's book. It's one of these two books.
Calling the books is very charitable.
In one of these Ted Kaczynski-esque rambles, you have a here's an example of genetic entropy, and it's an article. It's just a screenshot with a hyperlink in a printed book because that's how they roll. But it's an article, and it specifically says genetic meltdown, or mutational meltdown, or something, whatever it is, which is the literal opposite process of genetic entropy. Genetic entropy. Hypermutation, too many mutations accumulating. Genetic meltdown, loss of genetic diversity, high genetic drift, lots of inbreeding. Therefore, you're expressing recessive deleterious traits. They are opposite things. Well, that whole crew doesn't know the difference.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of conflating of terms that tends to go on over there. I do have to.
Yeah, it's a lot. The conflating of terms is a nice way to put it. Not knowing what you're talking about when you're claiming to be an expert is another way to put it.
Yeah, I think that I definitely think.
And the Standing for Truth Neff debate, I made a point of reminding everybody in the live chat. There's a fossil record for Neanderthals that predates and is way more extensive than the narrow little slice that is being dealt with in the eating part at the tail end of where Neanderthals are bumping into Europeans.
So the long and short of that entire debate should have been this without, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens are sister species. This is not up for debate. You can posit that this reason or that reason or whatever, even though that those reasons that are posited, like patriarchal drive, all of that stuff, none of that has application within the realm of actually showing that is at play. Definitively, they are sister species. Now, that is, of course, highly problematic to the whole creationist worldview thing, as is the fact that all of the hominins essentially are earlier than anatomically modern Homo sapiens. There is no way to show this degradatory trend line from anatomically modern Homo sapiens, perfect Homo sapiens in the Garden of Eden, to all of these degraded hominins, because the hominins aren't degraded. Neanderthals are highly inbred, yes, but you still have to cope with the very non-pathologic nature of Denisovans, Homo naledi, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo erectus, Luzonensis, all of these other hominins that are inextricably normal animals doing their thing. And like RJ just said, oh my God, there are so many Neanderthals. And yes, the later versions are indeed very inbred. That's classic founder effect. But I have a real problem with how that paper was waved off in that debate, because you don't get numbers that are more definitive than pick 3 atoms in like sequentially with replacement in the universe and have it be the same atom.
Those arguments are only valid when creationists use them.
Yeah, and you guys, I don't know who all here saw it, but I covered something similar today with evolution and statistics. Common ancestry within the primates, that's also, statistically speaking, just running that shit in any analysis program, it's definitive. You have to find some other workaround for that. And I don't know what it's going to be. I hope they get creative.
Look, I think I know what it's going to be. God just made it that way. Because the thing is, you can say that about literally anything. And the answer is, okay, but God made literally everything act exactly as if evolution and common descent were true.
Indistinguishable.
So I'm just going to treat it that way.
Because God loves Charles Darwin.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with like last Thursdayism, right? Like, suppose that God actually created the universe last Thursday with everything that makes you think that there was time before last Thursday is just something he set it up that way. Because omnipotence, okay, there's no reason you can't. Fair enough. All your memories of things before that, all the historical evidence, all the physical evidence, great. So what do we do with this if we accept it? The answer is you act just as if the universe were just as old as the evidence says it is. Because if literally everything is concordant with that, then that's the assumption that gets you results.
Yeah, and so the weird thing about that, by the way, Dan, I gave you a wrench. I was told that you didn't. Also, Shannon Q is in the chat, and Agnostic Pagan Mom. Hello, both of you. I've never seen you around. Oh my god, I do know Shannon, but I'm pleased to have you guys here.
Also, I'm just going to say I'm going to leave in about 5 minutes because I do need to get to bed. It's likely that tomorrow will be a snow day here, which means both children will be home.
You probably do need some sleep for that.
Dan was excruciatingly polite, asking my permission to start this stream simultaneous with my show, and I had to say, "Go with it, kid."
Dan, the last thing that I was going to say on that is that it's like I really love the vibe that you get from so many creationists that tend to be like, like the evolutionists have so much at stake. It's their entire worldview. It's all this, they've got to do it. Otherwise, their worldview comes crumbling down. And all of these very like existential, what's the word I'm looking for? Implications. Yeah. And like from the perspective of like the scientists that I know, people accept evolution because it works for predictions and because it works for application. Within apology, within phylogeny, within basically all of biology, specifically, working with pharmaceuticals and pathology, right? We use it because it works. It's like people don't have an emotional connection to evolution unless you just are really into it. Like, I think it's interesting, and I would be very floored if it was, falsified. I don't even know how you would do that at this point. But to act like this is such a weird moral argument kind of blows me away. Even now, I still find myself surprised.
Standing is forced by the logic of his argument on Neanderthals because he has to have them as humans because he's made too much of a case that they had language, they had burial of people, they had proto-art, they had a whole bunch of traits that we think of as exclusively human. And since they apparently were in Neanderthals, if Neanderthals are an allied species, you've just blown the argument that they're uniquely human.
Yeah, well, I mean, setting aside the main paper of the sister species issue and the fact that the furthest you can get genetically between two humans is 99.9 and Neanderthals are 99.7, it's an open and shut case for separate species. It's an open and shut case for sister species. Both of those are true. Both of those are like heavily supported by like the empirical data. This is the shit that is mathematically based. And I don't understand the workarounds for that. But I mean, far be it from me. Hey, we're just along for the ride.
So,
Hey Dapper, I'm just going to take this opportunity to step out. Before I go, I just want to note that I've been Standing mentioned a while back wanting to debate something or other with me, genetic entropy, created heterozygosity, one of these ideas, and I've been saying yes, and he hasn't been open to doing it. But I just want to say, I you know what? You don't want to debate me? All good. I want to just put the offer out there, and I just put it in writing. I'll give him an hour to cross-examine me on whatever topic he wants. And what he said, and I just want to quote this so everyone hears it, because this is speaking of bones of contention. As long as we go back to the cordial, respectful dialogues, I'm growing weary of the nonstop battling. You know what? I agree. And Standing, you can stop acting like a child and name calling anytime you want. Go nuts.
There you go.
So you respond to my email and invite me on whenever you want, and I'm in. You have an hour to cross-examine me on whatever you want.
I gotta say, Dan, I mean, everyone hopefully, if you're here at my channel, you should know, everyone knows I've got like a massive thing for civil dialogue. I love it. Civil dialogue is my favorite thing to do. Love having these kinds of chats. But I have also noticed an increased level of vitriol coming from kind of the gang, and I'm not into it. You know, I much prefer the fun, almost like playful banter over the like name calling and like shit talking and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And like one thing before you go, Dan, because I want your input on this too. There is a huge astronomical difference between talking trash about someone's scientific opinions and talking trash about the person. Because like
Yes.
Yeah.
there are so many creationists that I know that are incredible people. They're really sweet. I love chatting with them. I love engaging with them. I consider them friends. But I think that their ideas about science are bad and uninformed. And I think we should be able to critique one another's opinions without hurting the person's feelings or like trying to hurt that person's feelings.
Without questioning the credentials, without coming up with middle school nicknames, you know, that kind of stuff.
But unless there's good reason to question the credentials.
Well, unless there's good reason to question the
There's been
credentials.
some good reason in a few cases recently.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's good practice.
You
Everyone
want a
here,
civil dialogue where science breaks out.
yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I got. Erica, thank you for putting this together. I'll catch the rest in the morning, and thank you also for hosting the thing I wrote. Responding to the CMI piece. So,
blast.
pleasure chatting with you, Dapper and RJ, and thanks everyone for watching. I will catch everybody later. The rest
See you
of you
later,
have fun.
Dan. Good luck with the kids.
Thank you.
Yeah. Take care of that little baby.
So one thing you had talked about earlier, Erica, was about bias and worldview and things. And I'll be honest, I would be much happier as a person if I could actually find good reasons to believe in young Earth creationism, because that would give me things like, oh, okay, I can root things like ultimate purpose, and I don't have to figure out nearly as many things for myself. And there's things like, existential crisis and whatnot, and existential dread, and I don't have to have as much of that stuff, and all of this stuff. It's like, look, if it were up to me, if evolution were true, or creationism were true, I'd choose creationism, hands down. I'm okay with admitting that.
And
I don't like
eternal,
evolution on an emotional level.
Yeah, dude. And eternal. Listen, though, I gotta disagree. Because you know what? To me, being monkey is heaven. It is eternal life.
Well, how about this? What if we assume creationism is true, and what heaven is like is the thing you would like most? And if that is be monkey, that's what you get to do.
Oh, that's fair enough. No, that
There
is
you go.
You've won me over, Dapper. You've done what none of us could do.
Well,
But that's the
there
thing.
be Schubert in heaven. Otherwise, it's a cheat.
Well, I mean, if heaven is the thing that makes you the most satisfied, which I think would be a reasonable definition, then there probably would be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
like, I am biased against evolution and all of this stuff. Like, I would rather it not be true, but I don't get to go there because I'm too concerned with things like, evidence.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I speak for everyone here when it's like we enjoy the conversation. It's a fun thing to banter back and forth. It's just like once things start getting like super rude and vitriolic and aggressive, it's like it's not personally my favorite way to be. But at the same time, and I know I speak for everyone here as well, in this case, if that is the way that it goes, I don't think anyone here is going to like shy away from kind of needing that attitude, which sucks because it's like everyone just wants to have a good time. Like we're just here to chat it up, right?
I would much
Ideas
rather
worth
have
having are ones worth ending. And if I have my opinion of a creationist who at least is honest about what they think and does so civilly versus some nincompoop who stealthily has a creationist perspective, but they don't actually let you know about it while they're troping stuff from the intelligent design movement, as Maddox did. Maddox did not display himself in his true colors. And that's why I go, wait a minute, can't you be honest?
Yeah, dude. Maddox is he is the main culprit of like, he's rude and he's just rude a lot. And I don't see a reason for being that rude. And then I get rude in response because I'm like, I'm not going to take this. Like, we owe each other a respectful conversation, and I don't feel like I get that from some creationists, and he's a big culprit for that.
But John went to Dunning-Kruger Community College, didn't he?
Yes, he did. My goodness, did he ever?
Oh my God. Yeah, there's some.
Didn't quite get a degree there, but boy, he attended.
Oh my
Ouch.
God. Yeah, RJ,
That's a double burn.
You missed earlier. Dapper was covering the incredible Genesis Apologetics video where they think that conventional science attributes every single Mesozoic fossil to the Chicxulub impact event. It was impeccable.
Yeah, it's the currently running series in terms of debunking on my channel, and I've already on my channel are the first 3 episodes. There's 2 more to go. They're already finished, so they're in the can, just waiting for upload times. But yeah, it's amazing.
They're straw men out of actual straws now.
Yeah, they're like, oh, one asteroid,
little swirly ones with the little spirals on them.
One asteroid couldn't account for all these fossils.
It's like
yeah, you're right. It couldn't. I agree with you. Why do you think that's a thing? I think.
Dude, I love that. That's the thing. Like, there seems to be very concentrated pockets of knowledge, right? And knowing the difference between the periods of the Mesozoic doesn't seem to be one of those pockets.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah, I
and of course, I'm an annoying person because most of the mass extinctions are triggered by magma plume breaches, not asteroid impacts.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're all ultimately climate change, but a lot of it has to do with these weird runaway effects when you've got like wacky volcanism doing wacky volcanism stuff.
Yeah.
Right, and then lo and behold, it turns out if you're a specialist, anytime the environment changes a little bit, you're done. Like, extinction is the name.
If they try to bring up Chicxulub and the late Cretaceous, just wave the camp, the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, and the mid-Triassic, the Triassic mass extinction, which is not due to an asteroid impact. It's related to the opening act of the formation of the Atlantic.
Yeah, the thing is that I think is very funny, if a bit tragic, is that I hear a lot on creationist websites mostly. You know, it'll be like, the evolutionists, they get themselves involved in this storytelling of like, back when, there was the Western Interior Seaway and like all this stuff. And it's like, as if geochemistry isn't a thing at all, seemingly. Like, as
my
if
favorite thing is pretending that the Western Interior Seaway is a peninsula populated by dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's a thing they say.
Or just completely
on my show tonight,
the Permian doesn't exist.
C.
By the
Brown
way,
came in and said to everybody that Mr. Batman completely trounced me in the debate I had with him, according to C. Brown.
C. Brown came in here.
So into my video that I had today, the Evolution Hour. And he was just preening that Mr. Batman completely trounced you.
Dude,
Mr. Batman is a barely coherent buffoon.
Mr. Batman is
a nasty one to boot.
Yeah.
He was just going on about pedophilia at the end. That was sad. And I could never get into discuss dinosaurs.
Look,
I'll
be honest.
A really weird conversation.
Other people disagree with me, and I acknowledge this, and I acknowledge that perhaps I am wrong here. But the degree to which Mr. Batman talks about pedophilia makes me uncomfortable with the fact that he is a substitute teacher.
I would be creeped out by it as well. There's an obsession going on there that is way beyond just talking point.
Yeah,
normal people don't bring that up.
Yeah, that is a weird deal for sure. So pivoting from the topic of CP and the likes. Just for the demonetization purposes, although I wouldn't patently disagree with you on that whole thing. But you mentioned C. Brown has not showed up in my chat in a long time. I miss C. Brown because I am almost 100% positive C. Brown had a puppet account, because I think at one point when I was communicating with this puppet account in my assume everyone is good faith like days. At one point, I think he forgot to switch accounts because he was just talking to me as if he was C. Brown, and that's when I was like, "Hey, wait a second."
Oopsie.
I mean,
he was on for real on my show quite a few years ago. He was criticizing something, and so I invited him on and gave a link and had him come in the feed. This was back when YouTube was easier to fiddle with on guests that way. And he just rattled on, and you could never get him to shut up long enough to actually answer a question. And I finally had to kick him out because, and I told him I was never going to have him in the show again because he was just a waste of time, annoying.
You know, I was in a chat with C. Brown once, in like a room with C. Brown, and he was asking questions, and I was I was attempting to answer the questions. I was like, "Hey, here's my my answer to that," and to his credit, he was, at least with me, cordial enough to be like, "Well, I appreciate you attempting to answer the question, but I think you're deluded and all this." It always segues into the whole naive.
He was graciously condescending.
Yeah, he's really got a penchant for that for sure. Okay, I've got a dog that's like having a dream right next to the mic. If you hear,
it's hard for people to be nice with me because I'm an old fart. So, they can just dump on it. It's very easy. But
yeah,
you are pleasant, Erica. You are gracious and amiable in a way I'm not. So, you get slack.
Listen, I genuinely, I can be a little sassy. Everyone knows I get the sass going sometimes. Ooh, I get going. I'm ready to just talk trash. But genuinely, I enjoy talking about this stuff enough because, again, as many people who tend to get into this, tend to be, I used to be a young Earth creationist as a youngster. And so I love having these conversations because I wish someone had them with me. And and that's where that patience that people attribute to me, which I think I could probably be more patient, but that's where that comes from. And yet, some people, cough, cough, John Maddox, have referred to me as a snake and a Medusa on multiple occasions, to which I'm just like, I find that very funny because it's like, one, I think snakes are awesome and Gorgons are very cool. But moreover, it's like, okay, if I was trying to be like sneaky about it, you'd think I would do a better job because I've definitely lost my temper with John a few times. But I'm not doing a very good job at it if I'm trying to disguise my nefarious motive of luring everyone in with my beguiling patience or whatever the hell it is.
Beguiling patience. That's my favorite takeaway from this.
Yeah, but I like that too. Beguiling. That needs to be on a mug. Beguiling patience.
Seriously.
Erica, get that in the product line, Erica.
You're too patient. It's very suspicious.
Yeah, well, and that's my reaction to the whole thing because I'm just like, all right, dude. I mean, if you want to interpret that as nefarious, be my guest. It's just, ooh, he's got a way of pissing me off. So I do get a little rude when I'm around John selectively. Yeah, we all have our. I'm a classic triggered lib for sure.
Oh, goodness.
And me, I'm in the different box because. Dapper, and I think you were an ex-Young Earth creationist, and you are, Erica, and so many of the people that I interact with are in that box, but I didn't have any of that as a kid. I was never an ex-religionist. I was never an ex-creationist. I just came at it I was an evolution skeptic, but not out of any doctrinal thing until really the 1980s when I discovered the reptile-mammal transition, and I go, holy shit, that settles that. And that's the end of it. And so I come at it with a genuine curiosity, and that's why it's nice that Dapper has been doing the interviews that began with interviewing ex-Young Earth creationists and ex-Old Earth creationists, for that matter, to give their testimony in that, because it's useful to document that. And for me, it's a very different worldview than I'm coming from, and so I can look at it from the outside, but to have somebody inside that frame say, this is what I felt, this is what I thought, this is the evidence that I used, this is why it seemed persuasive at the time, and this is why eventually I gave it up. That's gold. That's absolutely immensely interesting.
Well, and one thing that I've noticed, and you guys tell me if you've noticed the same thing, but usually when you find a creationist who, or I shouldn't say usually, I have seen a slight increase in creationists who tend to have a really good education. They tend to know what they're talking about. They're smart people. a lot of them have had like a personal experience, or I guess I should include old Earth creationists in this as well, but they've had like a personal experience that kind of informs where they're coming from. And I don't know, like I wonder to myself, what if that experience had not occurred? Where would you be? And a lot of them, when asked that
Well, I know
question,
Philip Johnson, as an example, he became kind of an intelligent design religious activist after he had his marriage fall apart.
and I'm not trying, I want to be very clear. I'm not trying to throw shade and say that those things didn't happen. I don't know what people experience. I'm not going to claim to know that. But I'm curious as to, like, you know, the experiences that we have shape our opinions, our thoughts, and our trends, where we go, and where we're going, and where we came from. And so it's like I
think this is what happened with the formation of the whole Noah story in the Bible. Is that when Jews were taken into captivity, they had an already existing religion, but it was tremendously traumatic for them to suddenly be just pulled out the rug from under them, and they had to make sense of it. And they basically upped the ante by creating a vastly more mysterious, don't ask me questions, just do what I'm telling you, God, that filters down for centuries after that.
Well, Dr. Josh Bowen, who runs Digital Hammurabi, I had the pleasure of talking with him on Godless Granny's channel yesterday, I believe it was, and he man, that guy knows this stuff. I mean, he reads like all of the languages that all of the, like, kind of like you do, Dapper, but like
it gives him a tad advantage, doesn't it?
I just watched a bunch of his Learn Sumerian because I wanted to know a little bit more about Sumerian grammar. And so here's the thing. I want to have him on my channel to talk about a very specific topic. What's a word?
He would,
because when it comes to, because here's the thing, when it comes to Sumerian, the question "what's a word" is really up in the air in a way that it's not in most languages.
Well, and something
I want to have that as a conversation.
That's like a really interesting topic in the whole point of how to conceptualize how the language is constructed, as well as how do you depict it in what started out basically as an accountant's tool that turned into a language, written language.
So the thing is, I've seen people analyze Sumerian as isolating, agglutinative, and polysynthetic because it's super weird and it's a language isolate. So we don't have any related languages that are spoken or that were ever spoken that we can actually compare. And so, like, I want to talk to him about that because, like, there are these Sumerologists call them like noun or verb. What's it? I can't remember. It's like verb strings or verbal phrases or something like that, right? And the same thing for nouns, right? But the question is, like, okay, but are there word breaks? Like, how does this actually work? Because linguists actually have a reasonably good definition for what counts as a word, but Sumerian, because we don't have any spoken examples.
Are there any living of that language today, or is it totally extinct?
No, it's completely gone. So at the time that it existed, we don't have any evidence of any related languages. Yeah. And the other languages in the area...
That topic I want to watch close, because that is enormously relevant to the idea of how varied is the language system in human beings. And we know that most languages are highly inflected. And then you've got mutant forms like English and Chinese that have turned into word order language. To have Sumerian as a structurally distinct form is really interesting. Yes.
The thing is, it's not clear that it's structurally distinct because it might actually be that the writing system is mimicking an isolating language in some ways, but the actual phonetic realization of that was actually more, say, agglutinative.
Huh.
So it's a weird.
And remember, for Erica, that this is critical in primate evolution because we're trying to figure out how much of our linguistic system is a kind of a unique spin-off of the primate brain, compared to whether things like that could be occurring in cetaceans and others that have a radically different brain structure because they've come from such a disparate evolutionary line from us.
So I've harped on this before, but I want to bring it up again because I think it's so cool. But one of the dumber of the old world monkeys, the geladas, Theropithecus gelata. Some people call them gelada baboons. They're basically these big oafish-looking monkeys that live in the Ethiopian highlands. And they've got one of the simplest chitterings that any of the ground monkeys have. And yet, when you record it and you actually look at the strains of vocalization, I guess you would say, I almost said speech, but it's obviously not speech, vocalization.
Mm-hmm.
But they all follow Menzerat's and Zipf's law. They follow human linguistic laws of efficiency for transfer of information. And then you've got vervet monkeys that can be deceitful intentionally using certain vocalizations, and you've got Campbell's monkeys that use syntax and this weird proto-grammar where they can use a suffix to change the call. And then you've got the great apes, which are primarily gestural. But that being said, they share over 95% of their gestures with human toddlers up to the age of 2, inherently, seemingly. So obviously those roots are there, and Dapper would know this better than I would probably, but to what extent, how different are they really is the question.
Yeah, so the big thing for the difference between human language, for me at least, from my look at linguistics and what does it mean to be a language versus another communication system that isn't really linguistic, the biggest difference is the ability to abstract. So a lot of animals, especially, so a lot of primates have a call that might mean, there's a dangerous thing on the ground, or there's a dangerous thing in the air, or hey, I found food, right? But they don't have a way to say, hey, that dangerous thing that's on the ground? I hate those things. Or yesterday I saw a thing in the air and it was dangerous, but no one was around, so I didn't bother to tell anyone. They don't have ways to talk about things that aren't currently present, but that they have terms for generally. So when a monkey makes an alarm call, it's because there's a thing right now, right here. We have to react. And even if they're lying about it, the meaning of the call is this is a thing right now. Humans have this weird ability to talk about things that aren't currently here and to understand that this is not a thing that's happening right now. You don't have to react to it right now. This is a thing that happened in the past, or I'm imagining a thing in the future. Yeah. And then on top of that, they can then build on abstract concepts like, hey, wouldn't this be cool? And so humans have that weird ability to
ultimately
back off from the immediate now.
We could summarize it the fact that we can tell stories.
Basically,
That's one of the unique things. It's not so much that we have grammatical language, although it is, but the fact that we can tell stories about the past, the present, the future, made up shit, gods, all this stuff. And once you have that capacity, not only does it instantly open up a landscape of thought, but it also instantly changes the structure of ethics and morality. Because now you jump from a direct reciprocity morality where everything is based on transactions at the moment to reputation and name, and that which comes about because of the language structure. So it instantly goes through its state change into a new level of ethics and morality.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I'm gonna link a study in the side chat because there's been some interesting work on orangutans and their ability to reference past events. I'd be interested to see what your thoughts are, Dapper, because it's not inherently like a vocal communication, but it's almost more of a real one. But I'll link it in the chat so you can see.
I will point out that in humans, sign languages do meet that sort of abstraction requirement. So humans are capable of communicating linguistically with sign language. Now, there are actually instances where we know of de novo sign languages developing in deaf communities that did not have a previous sign language. And so one of the things that's interesting is humans who don't have any language whatsoever are capable of creating a new language within a single generation. Yeah. And we know that because of there was a really important example of this in South America. And I wish I remember which country it was, but I can't off the top of my head, and I'm sorry.
Right. No. Don't worry about it.
But there was a case in which there was a community of deaf children, and this was a country that just didn't have much education for the deaf at this point. And they were brought into a school, and people attempted to teach them European Sign Language. But most of them were a bit old and resisted this. However, they developed amongst themselves their own sign language, and then they brought in linguists who specialize in sign language to help the teachers interpret what's going on and figure out this, and they looked at it and they said, no, this is a fully featured sign language complete with a specific word order, grammar, tense marking, all of the things that you need in a language. And these kids developed it in a single generation in less than 10 years. And so if you put a whole bunch of kids together who don't share a common language and they don't have anyone else to talk to, they'll find a language. They'll make one.
Yeah.
And that is one of those things I'm like, that's a pretty crazy human thing that while it's connected to things that other animals are doing, it's extremely highly developed with humans.
I would agree. I think communication is something that humans excel at, and it's partially because we are such a deeply social species. I mean, famously, it's known that humans are common ancestor with other Australopithecines, depending on whether or not we're descend from Australopithecus afarensis, Africanus, or some other unnamed currently Australopithecine. But we all lost our muscle mass before we actually gained the big brains. That's what's currently thought by the structure of the muscle attachments on the bones that we have. And given that, the only thing we really had going for us was this incredible ability to work as a community towards a similar goal. We lived in tight-knit social groups that were smaller than some of the other ground primates, but to the key point that we were able to communicate in such an efficient way, even then, it's thought that we were good at communicating over distances, which would imply some kind of vocalization that is significant. But I think one thing that you said that is really interesting is that little kids can kind of work it out, right? Like you put a bunch of little kids isolated that are deaf and they come up with a sign language, right? I want to present a flip side to that. And
I put a paper in the side chat there from PNAS that may be alluding to that episode from a kind of a side direction in that. So that from 2010.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Isaac Clark says in the chat, we were the social speedy boys of the savannah. True. Also, sorry, I haven't been very active in the chat. I've had a couple of glasses of wine, and I'm also just having such a fun time on the conversation. So my apologies. But what I was going to say was that in a very interesting, very commonly looked at problem within primatology is to what extent do other animals experience a theory of mind? How do they recognize others? Can they associate others as, essentially, can they put themselves in another's shoes? Do they know what other individuals know as far as what information they have access to? And in my opinion, a lot of the work that's been done seems to suggest that either they are a gradient of us or we are a gradient of them. Of course, that's the same thing, right? But essentially, yes, there is a theory of mind to an extent. But one of the interesting bits that connects to that is that a theory of mind used to be connected to the mirror test very tightly. It was this idea that if you put an animal in front of a mirror and you put a dot of paint on their forehead, if they look at the mirror and then they wipe the paint off their forehead, right, they recognize that is them in the mirror, and that it, at least gives some semblance of self-awareness, and thus potentially supports the idea of being able to empathize with others as well. But the interesting thing is, even though rhesus macaques in a lab can recognize themselves in a mirror, rural kids can't. So rural human children, like really rural, like hunter-gatherer type rural, aren't exposed to their reflection very often. And they don't instantly recognize their reflection in a mirror as them. It takes them time to figure it out. So the question that I would be interested in asking with regard to these kids learning sign language is, to what extent is that the social impact of being around one another, and to what extent is that cognition alone?
Well, that's one of the really tricky things with a lot of the most intelligent animals is how much of the behavior that we're seeing is cultural, and by cultural I essentially mean learned. Yeah. And how much of the behavior that we're seeing is just a part of the basic biology. And so one of the things that we get with that is feral children is a thing, right? Mm-hmm. So we have examples of humans who ended up growing up essentially alone from a time where it was too early for them to learn language until it's too late. Because there's a cutoff point. If you haven't learned a language by a certain point in your life, not only are you not going to learn, a first language, you're never going to learn any language ever, period. And actually, we actually have examples in that same case with the deaf children, where there were some people who were too old to pick up on a new language, and they can still make gestures that have meaning, but they can't put them into any kind of syntactic, or not syntactic, but any kind of grammatical form. They have no sense of how to put any word orders into anything. So they can say, they can make gestures that end up meaning things like mother or pot or rock or things like that. And linguists can work with them to understand these gestures, but they can't form sentences.
Right.
And so we know that language is one of those things that humans are inherently capable of, but they have to learn one or invent one together by a certain age, or it just isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And so but a lot of human behaviors, it's like, which part of these behaviors are learned and cultural, and which ones are inherent? And like maybe the gestures, right, that is common to all, say, hominids, that might be an instinctual thing, like things like that sort of palm up gesture, that's sort of a friendly, like
that one,
beckoning. Yeah, that's probably an instinctual thing, right? Because all hominids seem to understand that gesture. It's a friendly, non-threatening invitation to social interaction. But things like pointing, chimpanzees don't get pointing most of the time.
Yeah, dogs sure do, though, which is interesting.
Dogs do, right. Dogs are better at understanding pointing than chimpanzees are. So is pointing a learned behavior? I don't know. It's one of those things, like maybe it's a unique instinct that developed in the hominin line that didn't happen in the line leading to Pan. But then again, maybe it's a learned thing that after you develop like the ability to abstract, you can understand the idea that if I point a finger at a thing, I'm using my ability to abstract and learning this behavior to direct the attention of another person through analogy. And then dogs just pick up on it instinctually.
Yeah, so there's this really interesting thing where all of the animals that we consider to be cognitive species, from your corvids to your pachyderms to your or proboscideans rather, to your cetaceans, and to all of your primates, all of the ones that have that huge brain to body ratio, they're all social. And if they're not, such as orangutans, right? They're not. They're considered solitary, right? But this is a very recent development. It wasn't until relatively recently, with the deforestation of Borneo and Sumatra, beginning around 10 to 20,000 years ago, that we began to see this more.
And they're quite recent species too, only about 300,000 years.
Yeah, yes, and the interesting thing is, orangutans next to humans are the animal that spends the most time raising its offspring. So the question there is, okay, have they transmitted that need for sociality into rearing young? And that's a very interesting question.
Well, how does that work with? How does that work with the males? Because my understanding is the males have very little involvement in child rearing.
They do, but males also do this interesting thing where they've got this very large home range, and females and males are both intrasexually very intolerant. So females will beat the crap out of females if they encounter each other, and males will beat the crap out of males if they encounter each other. But a male home range will occupy numerous female home ranges. Females inherently have smaller territories than males in orangutan, Sumatran and Bornean. And so I believe the thinking is that males essentially solicit, right? They go from female to female. And if they are a flanged male with these big, beautiful cheek pouches, then they're probably very, reproductively successful.
Okay, so orangutans as jealous traveling salesmen.
Essentially, yes, with these gorgeous cheek pouches, gorgeous flanges. And so that sociality might come in a more fragmented sense by kind of visiting all of these females.
Yeah.
If memory
It doesn't
serves,
need to be a one-size-fits-all dynamic.
Right. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that males and females, sexually dimorphic behavior is a thing in primates. It's not overly gratuitous, I guess I would say, particularly once you get into some of the hominoids. But orangutans kind of fit the bill for that. They're very weird. They're also very dimorphic.
Now here's a more complicated problem, Erica. We know that John Maddox has grammatical language, and yet the output of that is often incoherent dreck. Can we account for this scientifically?
Oh, I think the only answer is that what we're dealing with is actually a late surviving species of Paranthropus.
Ah, yes, there we
Ha
go.
ha ha. Yeah, it's the only explanation. Ugh.
So I will say, I think, interestingly enough, that the various human cognitive biases, which are displayed by pseudoscientists in general, creationists included, actually, I do think tie into the fact that basically the human ability to reason is more or less hijacking off of monkey brain that was used for more basic, simpler things for the most part. And by monkey brain, I really mean like Loritz brain.
Big,
right?
yeah, very strepsirrhine brain.
Right. Like when I say monkey, like most, like say catarrhines are actually already very derived. And you got to realize, like, our ability to say, oh, hey, I think that's wrong, is very closely linked just chemically to our ability to say, oh, hey, no, that's gross. I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, disgust, right?
Right. Yeah, disgust. Like, oh, that food is bad. And it's the same kind of neurological pathways that are telling you that idea is wrong. And that's one of the reasons why we have things like confirmation bias and selective memory and things like that, is because we're the human ability to reason is hitchhiking, essentially, on more basal ideas like this tastes good, this tastes bad, I don't like that smell, that other monkey is attractive, this monkey is mean to me, I don't like that one. Right? And the thing is,
add in other factors like that anterior cingulate cortex that primates use to resolve social conflict. We've further co-opted it for self-deception.
Yep.
Yeah.
The human means by which we take monkey brain stuff and turn it into human brain stuff is a very, very interesting series of.
We're the monkey Lego set.
Yeah, France the Wall covers that a lot in Mama's Last Hug. It's really interesting.
But the thing that means.
Oh, I had the honor of I saw one of his lectures that he gave here in Spokane a couple of years ago. Marvelous lecture, marvelous.
I'm so jealous.
One of the interesting things, though, is that means that the exact same reason that humans are able to so effectively do things like science and reason also, to a large extent, explains instances like John Maddox, which is absurd amounts of arrogance coupled with absurd amounts of ignorance. It's because you're coupling the same.
Well, there is, in fact, a curious connection between mathematics and engineering skill and at least lower level autism. That a tiny little flip, a switch can switch so that something that would normally lead off into minds that can do socially acceptable but clever mathematics and the like might get tunnel vision focused and turn into a different focus that's using exactly the same brain system. Similarly with the dynamic between, it's certainly not universal, but manic depression and artistic capacity in so many painters and musicians.
I just realized what I'm saying is that you have to be incredibly smart to be as stupid as Maddox.
We finally reached the thesis statement of the entire stream.
And they need to be a Tortugan.
Well,
but that's part of the way that humans got smart, right? Because the thing is, when you couple your this is right to this is safe and comfortable and or pleasurable, and you couple this is wrong with this is gross and unpleasant and disgusting. If what ends up being the case is something like you have a prior emotional connection to a particular idea, it's entirely understandable why even the smartest animals might couple things they find emotionally distasteful with being factually incorrect. Because
Yeah.
no one wants to believe things that are uncomfortable.
So the interesting thing about that, right, is that, you know, the inevitable question is, all right, you know, it sounds like a whole lot of weird connections. How do you know that any of this is valid? The connections that are being made from monkey brain thing to human brain thing. And the way that these connections are made is that when you present, and this has been done empirically, not with the specific example I'm giving, but indeed in the lab. But when you present something like a rhesus macaque with something that would make them, you know, uncomfortable or disgusted or repulsed with like a worm or something of that nature. Everyone's seen the funny videos of the gibbon where the gibbon sees the caterpillar and it touches it and it's like, ooh, and it runs away. Like it makes exactly that expression. But the same
Don't like that.
Yeah, the same areas of the brain light up in that rhesus macaque when a rhesus macaque is presented with a caterpillar similar to the gibbon as a human when like humiliated, for example. These and so the question is, okay, can you really draw that connection? Well, you can't with any certainty, but that's just science. You can essentially say, all right, it looks like there's some kind of relationship here with this disgust reflex. Because similarly, when you present humans with something like a foul-smelling odor or feces or something along those lines, the disgust response is activated. So obviously, there's a connection between feeling I don't like and disgust, which is a very primal and very useful emotion to have.
Here's another variable that connects into that area. That I think the work was done with orangutans, but it may have been a different species. But they had an example of where it involved counting. And so that you had something they really like jelly beans or whatever, and they would have a jar of like 3 jelly beans and 5 jelly beans. And the thing is whichever one they grab for first will go to the other ape. And when it was just 3 and 5 in a jar, they just instinctively go for the most. And they can't get past that. But when you would replace that with symbols referring to the 3 and the 5, somehow that circuit doesn't kick in. And they could go, wait a minute, if I point to that one that's got the 3 on it, I'll get the one with the most. And when they would go back to the physical quantities, the thing would kick in. So there's possibility that a lot of the dynamics of what happens in humans are systems that may have been playing a role in ancestors that have gotten broken down in the same way that the I hate broccoli gene has been disabled in half of the people, so that they're able to eat green leafy vegetables without going bleh, whereas other people don't. Well, that opens up new options for things, and an awful lot of what we think of as human evolution or specializations in other species are those things where an old system not only gets co-opted, but gets modified or broken down or disconnected, so it's no longer acting as a weight or a lever that prevents a new behavior from occurring.
Well, now there's an interesting thing I want to point out, because we think of numbers and counting to an indefinite extent as a pretty common thing in humans, but there's actually one documented language in the world that does not have any numbers. It has a word that means a small amount, and it has another word that means large amount, but that's all it has. It's Peraha, and
that culture never developed double entry bookkeeping.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they're in the Stone Age in Brazil. But
there you go.
But it's an interesting thing, because they can reliably determine whether a certain amount is more or less than another amount up to a point. But once you get around to like 6 or 7, they start to have trouble reliably distinguishing which amount is more. So it seems like humans have an innate ability to determine number.
And animal studies show that same dynamic of birds and other fairly intelligent animals are able to get 1, 2, 3, and then it's like many.
Yeah. And so a similar thing can happen with humans. Like, for instance, most humans can reliably immediately count without having to actually go 1, 2, 3, 4, up to about 5. Some humans can do it up to like 7. But there are actually animals that can do it much higher. Like, there are some parrots that can reliably go up to like 10 or 12 and know which one immediately is more. Yeah. And so just the ability to count is one of these weird things that's on a spectrum in different animals.
So short-term memory is one of those for sure.
Chimps beat humans by far.
You sit a chimp in front of a lexigram, right? And you flash the numbers up on the screen, 1 through 12, for just a second.
And they could do that way faster than humans can.
Yep. They consistently, not only do they consistently outperform like toddlers, they consistently outperform adult humans. Like
I've seen some of those experiments. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, and you know, and another interesting bit about that is this idea of like, all right, how do we really classify like emotions such as, you know, disgust or joy or fear or, you know, things of that nature? And I've got it on the brain because I just finished the book, but Frans de Waal was you know, kind of waxing poetically on it in his book Mama's Last Hug. He's a famous primatologist. And he was like, you know, we anthropomorphize primates, but this is kind of an inherent problem because we are primates. And to a degree, anthropomorphization is a little bit like apropos, like it's a little bit necessary, right, to do. And there's this entire chapter that covers, you know, altruism and spite. And essentially, you know, primates, when given the option of red and blue tokens, and a red token means that they get 3 treats, and a blue token means they get 1 treat, but so does their partner, who's in an adjacent cage, and the two can see each other. The second they figure out, they get the gist of what the tokens means, they overwhelmingly favor the altruistic token. They want to help the other. Now, of course, you think, that's so cute. That's adorable. That's very sweet. But the interesting thing is, it changes a little bit. That ratio skews more towards 50-50 once they can't see every single time that there's, you know, once the adjacent member can't see that they're handing in the red token.
So it has social context. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it has very little to do with them being capable.
In the same way that people who are known to be giving charitably will tend to give more than if they do so secretively.
Right, and this is something that's been exhaustively looked at. There's a primatology research center in Georgia that's really looked at this, but it's been done time and time and time again, and it even holds for capuchins. So this is something that's even true in platyrrhines. That to a degree, there's this altruism that's at play when you know that the individual who's in your troop, who has a say in what happens to you later.
You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, provided we get to see us do it.
Right.
Wait, don't you mean strepsirrhines?
No, I was talking about platyrrhines. Capuchins? Platyrrhines?
Oh, sorry. Look, my internal map.
Here's another one I'll toss in the mix.
Yeah,
I've mentioned it sometime on my show.
I know. I admit, my internal map of monkey systematics is not that great.
Hey, listen, I'm like 3 glasses of wine deep, and even I, come on. But
Look, of course, you do this for like a living.
I'm intrigued with the issue of synesthesia.
I was going to say,
we know that
you put me up with some.
We know that we've got this crosstalk.
Name a Ceratosaur that isn't Ceratosaurus.
Yeah, can't do it. Cannot do it.
Here's a hint. Modungosaurus. There you go. There's one.
Okay, so let me see. Hold on. Let me double check here. I think we've got we've got a critic in the comments. Dessel Drace thinks that Frans de Waal is he thinks that he's a quack essentially. Oh, I disagree, Dessel. I do disagree. These are really nice.
Oh, so would I.
Yeah. They're pretty consistent. I mean, you can disagree with his extrapolations, right? So like you can essentially look at the work that de Waal has done and been like, and essentially take the stance that, all right, what he's inferring isn't good. I don't like it. That's fine. You're entitled to do that. But the empirical nature of the studies are indeed there. I would disagree with you there. I really would.
Oh, fighting words.
Debate. I know.
Anyway, here's one I want to throw at you, and because of the time lag and stuff on Signal, I may have gotten there, is that whole bit about synesthesia, which intrigues me, because we know that of things where people see colors when they hear sounds and various other things are because the brain centers are cross-talking with each other in unusual ways. And what intrigues me is the snap presumption would be that this is some sort of a derived feature that pops up. But what if it's not? And so we would have no way of knowing it, but might Australopithecines have been heavily synesthesic, but wouldn't have noticed it in the way we would because they didn't have written language, they didn't have other things. So they may have had a crosstalk going on in the brain that eventually becomes specialized as the way it is in our brains, where we no longer have those features, except atavistically popping up once in a while. So that's another variable that might have been playing a role in the development of social systems and language systems and communication systems that would be hard to see an analog on now because we've lost those connections.
Well, my thing there is...
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dapper.
My thing there is now we're getting into things like the philosophy of qualia and stuff, and I'm like, I'm not sure I'm prepared to talk about any of that.
So
we can't solve that today?
Well, we might be able to solve it between modern humans, but my problem is I'm not even sure how I would define synesthesia in a non-Homo sapiens. Like, I don't even know.
So my thing is, you can boil things down to, like, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, you can boil things down to what increases fitness. If you're a primate, social groups tend to increase fitness to a certain degree, depending on your taxa. In human evolution, we definitely see a connection with increased group size to approximately 100 individuals and increased fitness. You can tell this by approximations of individuals in certain living sites. You can do so in modern hunter-gatherers and looking at what's typically considered to be efficient. But it boils down to, if you're social, communication is definitively going to be selected for to a degree.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the question is the ability to be amicable and sociable and communicative, is that offset by the potential for the males in your group to favor competition instead? Is the monopolization of potential females, or if you're a female, the monopolization of potential resources, going to usurp that potential cooperative benefit? And I think you essentially have to come into this sweet spot scenario where the environmental conditions heavily favor cooperation. And I don't really know what those conditions would be. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. Oh, Dessel says, you act like DeWall gives empirical evidence when actually he repeatedly lies by omission or obfuscation. I'm explicitly talking, I don't know about DeWall's personal life. I won't speak to it because I don't feel that I know about it enough. All I'm talking about is the experiments that were performed with him, and I believe it's Joanne something, at the Georgia site and at the Yerkes field station. And these are, very nice studies that are indeed, I mean, goodness gracious, you can see the videos of them online, at least with the capuchins and with the with the chimps. So
I've been published in technical journals and all of that.
Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, I would argue that if you don't like Franz de Waal, you don't like his work, you don't like what he does, that's all fine and dandy. I'm not going to argue with anybody on their personal opinion on an individual, but I would argue that if you're going to critique his empirical work, I would argue that you almost have to present like a reason, like a precedence for saying, all right, you can't make the connection between red and blue tokens and what appears to be a heavy skew towards, altruism, or in the case of capuchins, the test that they ran on fairness. So I would suggest taking a look at the papers and kind of taking a beef with those, because that's all I'm talking about. I like Franz de Waal personally. If you don't, that's fine. Yeah, he says he's arguing about his work. I don't know what you mean by that. Maybe you mean his technical work, because usually those have multiple authors. So I don't know. Dessel. I don't know what to tell you. I like Franz de Waal, and I think his work's pretty good. That's my opinion.
Ask them for a source for who they are relying on for a criticism of de Waal, because I don't see that, there are cases when you have technical papers in either Science or Nature or PNAS where there's like a pushback and you'll get a response and there'll be comments. I don't see that happening with de Waal very often.
So Dessel doesn't like his books. That's fair. They're very romantic. De Waal does a lot of romanticization in his books. But that being said, the topics that he does cover of the studies that have been done, which are represented honestly in a bibliography at the back of the text, if that's what I'm specifically speaking to, tests on fairness, the tests that were run on altruism and spite, the likes of that. And if you don't like it, that's fine. I just think if you're going to criticize the empirical work that was published in journals, which is again what I'm speaking of, you have to present a precedent to do that. That's my thoughts. But if you don't like them, you're entitled to that, Dessel, for sure. For sure. Well, gang, we've almost been going for 2.5 hours. The time flies when you're having fun.
And I am having
fun. It lasted so long that you went past Evolution Hour and I was able to come
in. Although we went way past...
didn't even die on me.
That's amazing. And we went way past just like, what's the stupidest thing in creationism you've heard recently? Although, I will say, I think I want
science
in. Well, yeah. But I think that if it were a competition, which I'm not saying it is, I think a single asteroid, I think the idea that there's a creationist who thinks the mainstream believes that the Chicxulub impactor was the cause of every dinosaur fossil ever up until the Paleogene.
Because that's one that they have to just have made that up out of thin air, because it's not something that anyone with a functioning brainstem should be able to come up with on their own.
Yeah.
You know what?
But I will also say, vote raw Matt, DFOTY.
No, I was going to agree with you, Dapper. I think that I can present, Dan can come up and present a number of different Jeanson being dumb, and Jeanson is being dumb a lot, or Paul Price doing Paul Price things, or in the realm of casual creationist John Maddox doing John Maddox things. But I think that in the case of which was the worst bone of contention recently, I do have to agree. I think you win, because Genesis Apologetics is an organization, which means multiple people signed off essentially in scripts that okayed the idea that every Mesozoic fossil.
Yeah, nobody there went, what?
The Chicxulub crater thing. Yeah.
It's just absolute insanity. And I remember watching the video, and at first, like, that was my initial interpretation, but I had to watch it like 2 more times because I was like, no, that can't be what they're saying. But then every time I watched it, I was like, no, that's what they're saying.
Scientists on that. Is Tim Clary, Andrew Snelling, Austin, which one of them has been contributing to that?
It's the only one that I can say for sure that they are trying to cite is Arthur Chadwick, and they didn't ask him about this. They just pulled clips from Is Genesis History from Arthur Chadwick. As far as I know, no actual...
We've got a measurement. If you want to have one Morris, Henry Morris, back in the 1970s, insisted that the craters of the moon were caused when Archangel Michael threw lightning bolts at Satan during the early times. Awesome. So that one Morris can be the measurement of this. So we can figure out, is this new argument a single Morris, a 0.5 Morris, a 1.5 Morris? How would we measure that?
It's going to be at least 6, but by the way, that's way more badass than Lunar Bukake.
Yeah, true.
So we got a 6 Morris, okay. And that can also be translated into a sack of hammer dullness, which is an entirely different measurement.
But like, no, I'll be honest, it's completely crazy and insane, but I love that explanation. That's just so awesome. The craters on the moon are because Michael the Archangel was shooting lightning bolts at Satan, but Satan is apparently like really
that was in an old book that was passed out. Jerry Falwell put ads in TV Guide and other places for this board. I think it's called The Amazing Birth of Planet Earth. And so they were passing it out by the millions. And I had one why I ordered it off because I wanted to see this. And it had one of those statements in there where I'm going, wow. And no, as far as I can tell, nobody in the creationist community picked that one up in the same way that argument that CMI offered very, very briefly. And I think it may have been Chadwick again, who was arguing that the koalas were catapulted to Australia by volcanic eruption.
Oh my God.
Here's an interesting thing about Chadwick. I called him on the phone.
Did you?
I did, because I was trying to figure out when he gave the interview in Genesis History, and I found his phone number. So I called him, and we had a reasonably pleasant conversation. But what really, really, really annoys me and honestly angers me about Chadwick is that I know he knows better, because I read some of the papers that he signed off on as a PhD advisor or a master's advisor or whatever, and I've also seen his own data on paleocurrents. So when he makes a lot of the claims he's making in Is Genesis History, like for one thing, he says that bioturbation is vanishingly rare in fossiliferous strata. I know he knows that's wrong, because I've read a paper that he signed off on for someone's master's degree that shows that in the fossil-bearing strata that he himself says he digs in, there's all sorts of bioturbation.
I love that. I love that.
And his own paleocurrent data contradicts his claim that there was unusual unidirectionality in paleocurrents during the Mesozoic. There wasn't.
And Kurt Wise was repeating all of that stuff, and in fact had contributed some of the source data to it. And it's, by the way, it's published in like a Nature something or other, one of their geoscience subjournals. So the data is publicly accessible. And yet, why not to fact check whether Chadwick's conclusions actually matched up with the full data field?
Well, that stuff like that is why in my current video series that I'm doing on this video from Genesis Apologetics that I stopped referring to Chadwick as Dr. Chadwick and I started using Mr. Because the thing is, when you start lying about your own research, not even someone else's, your own research, I cannot take you seriously as a scholar.
I would argue that lying about your own research is like the cardinal sin of having a doctorate, right? Like or any kind of degree.
Yeah, the Mount Olympus there would be somebody like Sir Cyril Burt back in the 1970s, who they discovered that several of his technical papers not only made up data, but he invented his co-authors.
Awesome.
That's great. Is that worse than putting the header of a paper, or sorry, a journal that you were never published in on your paper?
Yeah, it was way worse. Yeah, and
Okay.
they only found out about this years. Burt was dead by that time. He was one of the big pushers of the idea of inherited intelligence, and he would just make up data out of thin air. Sometimes it would actually be fairly accurate data he made up, in the sense it matched other people's material. But the inventing completely imaginary co-authors, that's kind of a new bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so rough too. Because like the entire idea, right, that you get this doctorate, and the whole point of having this doctorate is like, I am going to further, the field of choice that I've picked. This is my charge. I've done all the work, and then you throw it all away by inventing co-authors and lying about your own data. It's just I can't even imagine the like.
Well, Erica, are you aware of my doctorate?
One can argue that it was easier to do flim-flam like this back in the 50s and 60s because you didn't have the internet, you didn't have the accessibility of information to fact-check material on a scale that we have now. And these sort of things do tend to come out in the more recent times when people were starting to go back and rechecking things and going, wait a minute, that doesn't fit.
Well, I just want to put it out there. I have a doctorate degree in paleontology from Beethoven University, which is at least as legitimate as Patriot University. And so I have made a new rule. Any venue which refers to Kent Hovind as Dr. Hovind, and I'm going to add a new caveat, or Raw Matt until he provides his school and the name under which he received his doctorate. Any venue that refers to either of them as doctor, I insist that they refer to me as doctor, because Beethoven University has just as much authority to grant doctorate degrees as Patriot Bible University.
Yeah,
I could get a doctorate in thinkology from the University of Oz.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I was sent a diploma because my co-host Beethoven looked up a diploma form and then he put my name in it. And
that's serious, yeah. And then, of course, we got all those people who have attended the Dunning-Kruger Community College.
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, we get those in the climate science field a lot.
Oh, climate science! We would need another stream to cover climate science and like the.
I'm down for another stream. Although I don't
The
know how much
deniers,
actually
yeah.
know what.
I love the one Potholer in his videos came up with the perfect phrase for the deniers on this. He calls them Mick experts.
Mick experts. I love that.
Can we start calling?
It's absolutely perfect.
Can we start calling the people who like Nephilim free who pretend to be quote unquote experts on like hominin, like anatomy and whatnot, but who don't know what
the name would
tibia
apply to
is?
that too. You can call them a Mick expert. And
Yeah.
so I've started using the phrase as well. And the other one, the trope that I use is this, okay, fine and dandy. I've told this to Standing for Truth and others. Listen, stop trying to get me into a debate, buckaroo. You write your bloody monograph. You send it off to the scientists that you don't like. You get them to agree with you that you're right. Then you come back, okay?
That really is the long and short of it, right? It's like writing self-published books and putting them on Amazon. That's a fun way to make income. More credit, sure, more power to you. That's what I should say. Not credit where credit is due. More power to you. But that being said, a self-published book does not a dissertation make. You do have to run actual like analyses in order to overturn one of the oldest theories in applicable science.
Self-publishing on Amazon is nice, but remember, Amazon is the one that allows authors to self-publish such amazing works of literature as Ravished by Raptors, the Dinosaur erotic novel.
You
well, remember, both
by
Ron
that you mean
Standing
the
for Truth and me and Jackson have self-published books on Amazon, but they are not quite equal.
Right. Look, I'm not denigrating self-publishing. I'm just saying you don't get to say, I have a book, therefore, yay me, I'm awesome. You actually have to have something behind the book. And if what you actually have is truncated hyperlinks in print, you have failed to meet the very basic requirement of counting this as a book, in my view.
Print so large that Donald Trump could read it.
Hey, you know what? I'm not going to make fun of people who need large print books because I have family members in that category.
So in addition to that,
that's not the main issue of it, but nonetheless, it is a way that when you have a work that totals up like 120 pages in really big font, this is not a book. This is a pamphlet.
Right, it's a pamphlet that you expanded on.
Yeah, fair enough. Although it does come in full color and with a laminated. So we can assume that there is a step.
Well, that's how the hyperlinks show up, right?
Right, that's how you know they're hyperlinks, because in full color they're completely as useless, but blue underlined text.
Dude, I love that.
So you know what? You can see them easily when you have to manually type in. That's the same thing with all the hyperlinks in Rupi and Sanford and
oh my god.
In one of SFT's community posts, I was trying to politely nudge him towards like, hey, you need to fix this, right? Because I was saying, I said in one of his comments something like, I'm paraphrasing here, hey, how do you use these hyperlinks in a print book? And his response was just, haha, tap it harder. And I was just like, no, dude, please, I'm trying to help you here. I am trying to point out that you have a major problem with the things that you're putting out into print. And your response is
the procedure that I use in that Jackson and I use also in The Rocks Were There. Obviously, all technical literature is listed in proper technical thing. We don't even bother with it trying to have a hyperlink for it. But anything that is a hyperlink are web references. And what I make the point of is, yes, we actually do list the entire web link, but it's full name of the authors and a complete title of the thing as it was printed in the website. And a reference to where the website is and all that stuff, so that you can find that source just by typing in the main title and search on the internet, find it that way, so you don't have to worry about having to type in the whole bloody little web link.
There's nothing wrong with citing a website, but there's a proper way to do it, and there are myriad improper ways.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, right? Like there is a bare minimum when it comes to citing sources, in my opinion, particularly if you want to be considered to be any kind of work of like scientific merit. I would say. And those, like the bare minimum for that, the bare minimum is a bibliography. I don't really have that in the Why Human Evolution is False tome per se. Instead, I've got
and the fact that Jensen's book doesn't have a reference bibliography, and Rupin Sanford's book doesn't have that, and not only do they not have a reference bibliography, but they don't even have a bloody index.
Yeah, the index thing is rough too. Yeah, the Why Human Evolution is False one is a rough one, in my opinion too, because this is like one of Standing's earlier works, right? So I think it's very much less edited than some of the others, because
he's just graduating off of crayon at that point, right?
They list Jason Ezard as an editor, and it's like, dude, if you think that Jason Ezard should be editing anything, I'm sorry, you're not, like, stop it. Get help. I'm quoting Michael Jackson here. Just stop.
That would be editing in the same way that taking an encyclopedia and putting it into a shredding machine and then into a blender is editing.
Now, I will be fair. Standing has recently said to me in a chat that he says he should have taken my advice about Jason Ezard earlier, and he regrets not doing so, and he has distanced himself from Jason Ezard. Fair enough, dude. Like,
fair. So that's fair. And in addition to that, Standing, when I found myself in a stream the other day that Jason Ezard, aka Faithful, Honest, and True, who sometimes heckles my chats in my comments section, showed up, I yeeted myself at supersonic speed.
Oh yeah, and then he still tries to talk to you.
Yeah,
he still tries to talk to you. It was so funny.
Dude, I was like, here's the thing, my guy. Like, you can't send death threats to people and try to dox them and expect others to be like down with that discussion.
He sent death threats to praise I am that I am.
Like, who sends death threats to praise, right?
Yeah, like, look, and the thing is, the thing that bugs me is like, why did he send death threats to praise? Because praise has theological differences from him in terms of the nature of the Godhead. Look, even like the imperial church of Rome in the 4th century, when there were disputes about, Christology and the nature of the Trinity, you know what their punishment was? It wasn't death. Arius, the one whom Christian histories call the heresiarch, the chief heretic, he wasn't sentenced to death. They said, dude, go hang out with the Persians, and that's fine. And you know what? That's what he did. And he lived the rest of his life there, another further 11 years, because, he was already like 70 at the time. So, it's, he was already pretty old in medical equipment at the time of the 4th century. But, and then he was deemed a saint in certain churches that arose in the Persian Empire. So, yeah, was that a bit harsh, in my opinion? Yeah, I don't think you should banish people for having a disagreement about theology. But on the other hand...
My favorite is when the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Pope got together in 1453 to try to patch over their differences, and they ended up excommunicating each other.
Well, to be fair, it was a papal legate who showed up in Constantinople, and after having his demands not immediately acquiesced to, slapped a letter of excommunication on the altar in Hagia Sophia, at which point the Patriarch of Constantinople was like, dude, what the hell? No, you're excommunicated.
Yeah. Well, and of course, by then, Constantinople was on the skids, so I suppose everybody thought they could push him around.
But the other thing that you have to remember about this whole situation is by this point, there had already been Western European groups who had basically gone into Constantinople and set up their own parallel church hierarchy in contravention to the canon laws that both Constantinople and Rome had agreed to in the Council of Nicaea, several hundred years before. So look, I'm not taking sides, but I'm saying that it wasn't as simple as
you got to follow the bylaws here. The rule here, it says on paragraph 4.
But that's the thing. It wasn't as simple as a Rome versus Constantinople dick measuring contest. There was a lot of bad blood that was both sides had some legitimate grievances, and it
and
was
they had
just one of those
centuries
things.
to steep it up. There's a reason why Byzantine has the connotation it does.
Well, yeah, but
people are very, very good at holding grudges. Even before, the advent of modern technology, we're very good at passing down the message through generations.
Yeah.
F that people group. We hate them.
Interestingly, I just finished my first draft of a script about the First Council of Nicaea, because I'm starting a bit of a new series called Atheist Myths, which is about things that I hear from self-proclaimed atheists that are just really stupid. And the first thing I'm going to cover on that series is stupid things that I hear people who call themselves atheists say about the First Council of Nicaea. For instance, most people who call themselves who talk about it, that call themselves atheists, thinks that the First Council of Nicaea was Constantine the Great, or Constantine the First, or Saint Constantine, depending on how you want to call him, was the guy in charge of the council. Nope. Or that it decided what books were going to be the Bible. Nope. Or that it rejected the Gnostic Gospels. Nope. None of those things are true. And so in this script, I go over who was Constantine, what did he actually do in terms of Christianity versus the various quote-unquote pagan religions, what did the Council of the First Council of Nicaea go over, what were the things at issue, what were the results of the council, and also how did the canon of the New Testament and the Bible at large actually develop in the Christian church, both before and after the council.
Now, Dapper, I got to ask one important question.
Okay.
Have you settled the musical rights to it?
There it is.
I'm actually, that's an interesting question. So I'm actually thinking about putting some background music to it, and I'm thinking about alternating Byzantine and Gregorian chant, because here's the thing about me. I actually like both of those musical forms. In my car is actually a CD of Gregorian chant, and here's the reason. It's incredibly relaxing.
Yeah,
Gregorian chant is one of the most relaxing forms of music I've ever found, and I'm somewhat prone to stress headaches. And you know what is really great for stress headaches? Christian chant. Come fight me about this. Look, you got a stress headache? Put on Christian chant in a language you don't understand and just tune out.
Dapper, I'm telling you.
Or if you want to generate a stress headache, put on either Charles Ives or very modernist Prokofiev.
Well,
right now, I wouldn't dream of debating you on that. I feel very passionate vibes coming from your end on that. I wouldn't dream of it. I feel like I'd be annihilated.
Well, here's the thing. Don't debate me. Here's what you do. The next time you have a stress headache, just type into like YouTube Gregorian chant or Byzantine chant, and find a video that's like an hour long or so, and just hit play. And don't pay attention to what they're saying. Just let it be in the background. And I guarantee you'll feel better.
Yeah,
Listen,
I think it's more congenial than white noise.
Oh, yeah.
It's calm and reflective, and there's loads of Gregorian chants.
Look, Christianity has given the world some of the best music that has ever been written, and I will fight you on that.
Ooh.
Well, Stephen Jay Gould thought who sang in a choir. Stephen Jay Gould thought that the Bach B minor Passion or B minor Mass was the greatest piece of music ever written.
I was a tenor in a choir for years.
I gotta say though, Dapper, that could potentially be the truth up until like the last 50 years. But then you reach the king of the hill dilemma, which is Christian rock doesn't make rock and roll, or doesn't make Christianity better. It just makes rock and roll worse.
Oh, look. I will also completely admit.
yes, I agree. I think we can agree on that.
Look, Christianity has also given some of the world some of the worst music ever. Like, who was it? It was Logic. I was talking to Logic a few weeks ago, and I presume most people here probably know who Logic is. But we were talking about the conversation eventually got to Christian music, and I said to him, "Look, Christianity has resulted in some of the best music in the world, but if you ever want to hear some of the worst music imaginable, listen to contemporary Catholic music. It is abysmal. And the example I gave him is, I don't remember, this is the refrain, but I don't remember the actual title. It's, he will lift you up on eagle's wings is the refrain. And he was able to find that song from that. It is like eardrum rupturingly, eye bleedingly bad. It is one of the worst songs I've ever heard, ever. The first time I heard it was in high school because I went to a Catholic high school. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, what is this noise that is assaulting my ears? This is the worst thing I've ever heard. And it gets worse because it's typically sung in congregations where no one's on key. The song itself is terrible. Look, contemporary Christian worship music is bottom of the barrel trash. However, you go back 1,500 years and there's some amazing music written. You go back to, say, like, you know, the early Renaissance period where, like, people are writing, you know, like requiems and masses and stuff in the classical style, and look, absolutely amazing stuff. But yeah, last 150 years or so of Christian music has been a big downhill decline.
Listen, I have no idea if this is being said ironically or not, but whether it is or isn't, I simply must shout out Andrew T from the chat, who says, that being said, Christian hip hop has been way ahead of the curve in terms of production, I will say.
Maybe, I don't know.
I am a huge fan of just the idea. I've seen very little of Christian hip hop in the sense of like actually looking into it, but now I feel compelled, if you will, to look into it.
Well, I will say there have been there's been a few bands that were explicitly Christian who actually did manage to get some mainstream like pop music success. And it's because they were actually, you know, talented musicians who actually managed to write decent songs and whatnot. So I'm not saying it's impossible. But yeah, Christianity has given humanity some of the best and worst music. And I don't know what the takeaway from that is, but I will maintain that is the fact, that some of the best and some of the worst music has come out of Christian music. And yeah, I'm a big fan of a huge swath of Christian music, as well as Christian art, right? Like, some of the best art, in my opinion, has been some of like the Renaissance period Christian art. Like, it's hard to find something that's better than like the Sistine Chapel and, you know, some of the various Madonna paintings that were painted at the time and stuff like that.
Or just think of all the juvenile delinquent Caravaggio painted.
Yeah. Well, look, some of the art that I own is like classical style Christian art, because there's like regardless of your theological position, there's a lot of artistic merit to it. And like, I look at other things like I was talking earlier about like Sumerian. I'm not going to collect Sumerian art. It's kind of trash, honestly.
Throwing shade.
Look, nothing against the Sumerians, but like, not super impressed with their sort of like cartoonish line drawing humans. I'm just not.
Yeah, you know, and you got a bunch of animals with wings on them, and you know that pretty well exhausts it.
Yeah, but like, I'll be honest, there has been a lot of quality Christian art. Now, I would also say that Republican Roman art also reached similar heights. And I don't think that Imperial Roman art was quite as
well.
Good
they were all riffing off of the Greeks. Well, we have to remember, though, that all of our impressions of that is kind of odd, because it would have all been painted in the same way that the Egyptians would have been painted. Everyone just, when they realized that the Parthenon would have been gaudily painted, and you go, shit, that's like cartoons. You know, we're used to seeing them as just a white marble. No, that's not the way they were originally. This is op art, really bright. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where like my hierarchy for classical art in the Greco-Roman goes, I really like Republican Roman art. It's just super high.
Is this a digression, or is it, Erica?
It's like Republican Roman statuary is super detailed and super realistic, and there's so much like gravitas to like the statues and stuff. You just look at it and you just feel the weight of authority, and it's just great. Then after that, I like classical Greek art, because there's so much motion and dynamism, even in static
That whole
statues and
Hellenistic
frescoes.
period, the art became
Yeah.
very realistic and vivid, and they had pretty well figured out how to carve a marble statue down to really vivid things, and that was then rediscovered in the Renaissance when they were so blown away. But of course, by then they didn't know they were originally painted, so they then imitated them all in that pure marble style. So all of the Michelangelo era stuff is done in that, except it is the case that the painted stuff was still vividly colored. So when they started doing the cleanup of the Sistine Chapel and revealed how vivid the colors were underneath all the smoke and soot, and people were going, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not how I saw them in the pictures. Well, the pictures were wrong. This is the original colors.
But my last, least favorite, but still it's good stuff, is Imperial Rome. Because Imperial Rome was just badly copying Greek classical statuary. And it's like, okay,
he argued
I get
almost
it.
everything about Imperial Rome was badly copied.
Yeah, Dapper, you're just roasting the hell out of long dead civilizations. I'm here for it.
Yeah, boy, what do you got against the Julio-Claudians? Hey, let us itemize it.
Look, I'm sorry, I'm not impressed with an idealized statue of Emperor Nero wearing a lion skin. I just don't care.
God, they listen for all.
But don't you want to actually see the Colossus of Nero that we don't get anymore?
No, I would like to see the Colossus of Rhodes.
Dude, for all their pomp and gravitas, the Romans simply could not impress the Dapper dinosaur.
No, Republican Romans.
There we go.
Okay.
Imperial Rome, much less so.
But they could do aqueduct. Damn it, they could do aqueducts.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing though. There's much worse art than Imperial Rome. I remember, this must have been 20 years ago, right? I went to an art museum in, it must have been more than 20 years ago because it was in Montreal, and I haven't been to Montreal in 22, 23 years or something. But anyway, so we were going through this whole exhibit full of great paintings and sort of hyper-realistic Renaissance styles, and it was great. There was a traveling exhibit of art commissioned by Cardinale and whatnot, and that was all amazing. But then we got to the modern art section, and I remember looking around and there was this one thing that was just a collection of basically mannequin hands arranged into some weird configuration. And there was a bunch of stuff that was just random colors splattered on canvases. And
Dapper's a fuddy-duddy.
Yeah, the entire exhibit, the only thing that impressed me was a chandelier made out of crystal glass that created interesting and complicated rainbow patterns on the floor because of the light mounted in an exact position, right? That was cool. But the entire rest of the exhibit, I was just this is stupid. So,
and on an allied theme of architecture, Stanford White, the guy that designed the original Madison Square Garden, was shot by Harry Thaw because they'd had a love affair with his wife, and he went berserk and blew his brains out there in the garden of the hotel, or the Madison Square Garden in 1906, and it was a notorious murder case. And Thaw went to jail, or rather, he was put in the loony bin because this was an insanity defense. And the joke is that in the 1920s, he was finally let out, and he went down into Florida and saw all of the pseudo-Spanish architecture that was being put up for all of these wealthy people. Addison Meisner, the architect, had designed all these things. And supposedly Thaw quipped, "Oh my God, I shot the wrong architect."
All right. I can't say too much about insanity defenses for murder because of personal history with such things, but that was a funny anecdote.
Oh, there was a sweet movie made about it, The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing, in the 1950s with Ray Milland and Joan Collins and that. And it's a pleasant little flick.
It does remind
take
me.
A look at it.
It does remind me of a faux Mexican architectural style that I encountered in high school. So I went to a Catholic high school, which meant every once in a while, and every once in a while I mean like it was major holiday time, the school would have like a trip to mass. And like, I'm not Catholic, I've never been Catholic, I was sent to a Catholic school because they were by far outcompeting the public schools in the area, and my parents could barely afford it. But
yeah, that's often the case.
Yeah, the closest parish was designed to appeal to the local Hispanic community, and it had like stucco walls and like the terracotta wall tiles and whatnot. And the thing was, it was so incongruous because I was growing up in New England, full of New England, like architecture and like colonialism.
The Remember the Alamo Church.
Well, yeah, basically, and it was so out of place because we're getting all this sort of like 16th, 17th century architecture. Like my parents' house was built in the 1700s. And in the 1700s,
we could do a whole show.
No one from Mexico was building churches in my hometown. I guarantee you. Look, the kitty corner neighbor to my parents, so like not quite across the street, but across the street and then one to the right, had a room for hiding slaves in the Underground Railroad. That's the kind of thing that my neighborhood was like. And then there was this parish, and I was like, this doesn't fit in at all. I'm sorry. This no.
Guys, we've been going for almost 3 hours.
More
I gotta
than 3, yeah. All right, Erica, thank you so much for having us. I'm perfectly happy to have another one anytime you want. Well,
yeah, I listen. We gotta do it more often for sure. For sure. We used to do this more frequently, and I always forget how much I enjoy it, but I think we all just get busy.
Yeah.
RJ.
Oh, I think RJ just dropped accidentally. I think that was a StreamYard thing.
Okay. Well, you know how it be when it be how it be. Yes, we will do this again sometime soon. Plan?
Absolutely. And we can even alternate channels. Like we could do one on RJ's and one on mine and one on Dan's.
I think that'd be a great idea. It would also just spread out like exposure. I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. I realize this was very long. We kept above 50. Really, we kept above 60 for most of the stream. So thank you for being here. I hope you found this, if nothing else, entertaining and maybe a little bit funny. And please do take care of yourself. What is it James usually says? I'm not going to do the moderate. I'm not going to
keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable.
That's the one. I got to come up with my own tagline. So I can stop because I've modded so much for him. Now it's like second nature.
And mine is so boring. The only tagline I have is I'm the Dapper Dinosaur, which is the most boring crap.
See, I've got a lovely intro. I go hello, my gentle and modern apes, but I don't have a good ending one, so I need to think of one.
By the way, that excludes me and it offends me. You should change it to amniotes.
No way. You got to evolve. Get with the picture.
I did evolve. I evolved into a theropod from being a basal amniote.
Yeah, but I'm talking about primate exceptionalism, of course. All right, we're ending the broadcast. Bye, everyone.
Bye.